Chapter 1986. When Emperor Shi and the Empress heard Shi use in different words, the hearts of the two peak experts who had reached the primordial realm shivered. Undisguised sorrow filled their faces. Emperor Shi, the vicious person who had stirred up a storm of blood in the Shi dynasty, personally ending the lives of more than half of the primordial realm experts in the empire, the cold-blooded emperor who had even killed his own brother, showed indescribable bitterness on his face right now. His hand remained in the same position as he supported Shiyu, but it seemed to have frozen in the air. What his beloved daughter had said was like a needle, piercing Emperor Shi's heart deeply. Tears flickered in Emperor Shi's eyes. They seemed to flow uncontrollably from the eyes of this cold-blooded emperor who was renowned in the Shi dynasty. His stalwart body trembled gently as he stared at Shiyu in pain. He opened his mouth slightly as if he wanted to explain something, but when he saw the blood on his daughter, he said nothing in the end. "Child, I'm your mother. I'm your mother. This is your father. This is your father." The Empress burst into tears. She rushed over and hugged Shiyu tightly without any regard for anything else. She hugged her so tightly that Shiyu was unable to break free at all. It was as if her daughter would vanish from her side if she let go. At that moment, she was no longer the great empress of the Shi dynasty, nor was she a peak expert who had reached the primordial realm. She was just a mother with a fragile heart. People from various places had already gathered around the Tianyuan family. The primordial realm experts from the Heavenly Moon Empire had arrived as well. They stood with the Divine King and communicated with him through messages, asking about the situation here. However, with so many people gathered in one place, the scene was strangely quiet. Everyone stood there silently as they watched this scene. Their hearts were not calm at all. The ninth prince, who had lost half of his face from the Empress slap, did not dare to make a sound. He looked at the sobbing Empress of the Shi Empire as she hugged Shiyu, as well as the Shi Emperor who stood beside her in pain. He grumbled inside. Never would he have thought that an overgod he came across casually after coming to the Tianyuan family to investigate the culprit behind the Flower of Ways was actually the princess of the Shi dynasty in the northern region. Moreover, the princess had almost died to his hands. At this moment, the ninth prince was filled with deep regret. At the same time, he felt extremely wronged. If he had known earlier that Shiyu was the only precious daughter of the current emperor of the Shi dynasty, he would not have dared to touch a single hair on her even if he was 100 times bolder. Although the Blood Sun Empire and the Shi dynasty were both rulers of a region, the current emperor of the Blood Sun Empire, who was the ninth prince's father, had many women under him. He was only one of the many children of the emperor of the Blood Sun Empire. If the interests of the empire really were threatened, his status as a prince could be removed at any time. However, she was the only daughter of the Shi dynasty's emperor. Moreover, from the feelings that Emperor Shi and the Empress had shown, no one doubted that they were willing to give up everything for their daughter. She saw that she couldn't break free from the Empress' embrace no matter what, so she gave up on the Empress and allowed the Empress to continue hugging her. However, she found it hard to accept the fact that someone had suddenly claimed to be her biological parents. She instinctively resisted the idea. "No, that's not it. The two of you are not my parents. I have no parents at all. I only have a foster father." Shiyu gently shook her head. Her tone was very soft. However, tears were flowing from her eyes. The Empress looked at Shiyu gently as she wiped away the blood on Shiyu's face with her right hand. The blood had already dyed the Empress' hands red. She said with a trembling voice, "Silly child, don't say such foolish things. We had no other choice when we abandoned you back then. I know you hate us, and I know you can't forgive us. However, since I found you now, I will use the rest of my life to make it up to you properly." Emperor, she walked over as well. He sighed gently. You've suffered all these years. Just like what your mother said, the reason why I left you outside was to protect you. As for the specific reason, I will explain it to you later. Now, tell me, who among the people around here has bullied you? I will make the decision for you." The expressions of the ninth prince and everyone else changed when they heard Emperor Shi's words. At that moment, even though they were Divine King-level experts, they could not help but tremble inside. The ninth prince secretly panicked as well. He had already sent a message back, but why had his father still not arrived? He had no doubt that Emperor Shi would kill him without any hesitation if the Blood Sun Empire still did not send anyone. He would not consider his identity at all. After all, Emperor Shi was renowned for his viciousness and mercilessness. This time, Shi finally broke free from the Empress' embrace. As soon as she thought about what the Tianyuan family had been through, she immediately shivered. She no longer cared about whether the people before her were her parents. She quickly glanced around. Newbies! Suddenly, Shi cried out and rushed over Newbies' side. Newbies lay on the ground with his eyes wide open. His skull had shattered and his soul had been taken away. Shiyu's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. They were filled with the flames of hatred and fury. She said painfully, "Why, you killed Newbies." Newbies was Jinshin's close friend. Shiyu had no idea how sorrowful Jinshin would be when he heard about Newbies' death. Hearing that, the divine king who had taken away Newbies' soul immediately paled. He hurriedly said, "Don't worry, Your Highness. He's not dead. His soul is still here." The divine king's attitude immediately took a 180-degree turn. Before he finished speaking, he hurriedly took out Newbies' soul. He looked uneasy as he carefully handed it to Shiyu. In fact, even his hands and body were trembling slightly at this moment. His heart was filled with fear and panic. Newbies' soul was fine. Once it was free, he immediately returned to his body. However, his body was heavily injured. As a result, he looked extremely weak right now. Yenaro. Suddenly, Mo Xingfeng's sorrowful voice rang out. Only when she heard her foster father's sorrowful call did she remember that Mo Yan had been standing in the crowd before. Even deities struggled to endure the spatial compression. With Mo Yan's cultivation as the Holy Emperor, Shiyu immediately paled when she thought of that. She ran towards the back of the crowd as quickly as she could. However, when she arrived, Mo Yan was nowhere to be found. All she saw was a pile of collapsed flesh and blood on the ground. Her clothes were scattered in the surroundings. Wasn't that Mo Yan's favorite attire? Mo Xingfeng currently knelt before the pile of flesh. His face was filled with sorrow. This sight struck Shiyu's head like a bolt of lightning. She immediately became stunned. Her body shook violently, and she almost fell over. Her face had already become extremely pale. She sat on the ground, paralyzed. She stared blankly at the lump of flesh on the ground that was no longer recognizable. She was on the verge of collapsing as tears uncontrollably rolled down her face. Yener, Yener, she murmured subconsciously. She could not help but think about the mischievous and lively girl of the past. She felt extremely sorrowful. Her feelings for Mo Yin were so deep that no one else could understand them. As a matter of fact, it could even be said that Mo Yin was the closest person to her in the world. Her feelings for Mo Yin even surpassed her foster father, Mo Xingfeng. Chapter 1987. Emperor Shi's voice was very gentle, but it was firm. His voice was filled with great confidence, as if there were very few things in the world that he could not accomplish. There were very few things that he could not resolve. The light of life immediately returned to Shiyu's eyes when she heard the Shi Emperor's words. It was like she had seen a sliver of light in a world of darkness. She looked at the middle-aged man with great hope and asked urgently, "Can you save Yener?" The Shi Emperor looked at Shiyu gently and said, "Since this person called Yener is so important to you, I'll make her appear before you again, no matter how great a price I have to pay. As long as I can make you happy, I can do anything for you." Emperor Shi. The two old men who had come with Emperor Shi heard what he said at the end. Immediately, the two infinite primes were alarmed. They immediately wanted to warn the Shi Emperor. However, as soon as they said that, Emperor Shi raised his hand to stop them. The two old men looked at each other. Emperor Shi was the current emperor of the Shi Empire. A qualified emperor could not place too much importance on personal matters. He had to prioritize the interests of the imperial family, and he would even sacrifice his own children at certain crucial moments. However, Emperor Shi did not seem to place the interests of the imperial family in his eyes at all. Instead, he prioritized his daughter. As a matter of fact, he had even said that he would do anything for his daughter. As the ruler of an eternal empire, he could never say something like that. As a matter of fact, he could not even think about it. The divine king who stood silently in the distance, as well as the primordial realm experts who had hurried over from the heavenly moon empire, felt very uneasy. A few of them looked at Shiyu and even showed a sliver of envy. If the emperor of an eternal empire, a peak expert who had reached chaotic prime, could make such a promise, just how many people on the cloud plane would be bold enough to provoke this woman called Shiyu in the future? Senior, can you really save Yin? Mo Xingfeng stared at Emperor Shi excitedly as he asked with a trembling voice. Emperor Shi nodded. Although her soul has been destroyed, fortunately, her cultivation is not great, and her soul was not directly dispersed. Instead, it was crushed by the pressure of space, so there are still some fragments left in the world. She only needs a divine king who has condensed a 7-colored flower to save her. As for the Radiant God King, the Empire happens to have one. With that, the Shi Emperor formed a seal with his hand and sent an Emperor's decree into the air. It flew towards the Shi Empire in the northern region. Thank you, Senior, for saving my daughter. Thank you, Senior, for saving my daughter. Mo Xingfeng was overjoyed as he thanked Jian Chen repeatedly. She let out a sigh of relief as well. Afterwards, she looked at the 9th prince and the divine kings, and her eyes immediately burned with hatred. She gritted her teeth and said, "The disaster of the clan is all because of them. They all need to die." The Empress looked at Shiyu and nodded lovingly. Afterwards, she looked at the 9th prince and the others, and her eyes immediately turned cold. With a flash, the Empress had already appeared before a divine king who had come with the 9th prince. She directly extended a finger towards the divine king, sealing up all of his cultivation in a single instance. Afterwards, she tossed the divine king before Shiyu like a dead dog. From the beginning to the end, the God King did nothing at all. This was because the difference in strength was just too great. Before the Empress, a divine king like him was like an ant. I never thought that the Empress' strength would be unfathomable as well. She's a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime at the very least. The hearts of the divine king and the infinite primes from the heavenly moon empire leapt when the Empress took action. The Empress struck out one after another, sealing up all the divine kings the 9th prince had brought with him in a single instance. She tossed them before Shiyu. Even the 9th prince, who possessed a great status in the southern region and was known to be the next emperor of the Blood Sun Empire, was not spared. He was also sealed up mercilessly by the Empress and tossed before Shiyu. The 9th prince's face became extremely ugly. He growled, "Emperor Shi, Empress, I am the current prince of the Blood Sun Empire. If you treat me like this, it will probably affect the relationship between our Blood Sun Empire and your Shi dynasty." "Shut up." The Empress called out coldly and slapped out again, landing on the 9th prince's other face. The slap sent the 9th prince flying. The other half of the 9th prince's face became a bloody mess. It was no longer possible to distinguish his face. Furthermore, the lower half of his skull had been smashed into smithereens. However, the Empress acted as if she had done something insignificant. She did not even glance at the 9th prince. Instead, she turned her gaze toward Shiyu. She was filled with gentleness and love. These people are no longer able to resist. Do you want Mother to take revenge for you? Or do you want to personally execute them?" Shiyu said nothing. She stared at the divine kings who had their cultivations sealed up furiously. She could clearly see how arrogant the divine kings were in the Tianyuan family, as if they could rule over everything. Killing intent immediately filled her eyes. She hated the divine kings before her. If it were not for the arrival of Emperor Shi and the Empress, the entire Tianyuan family probably would have been wiped out already. As a result, she wanted to deal with the divine kings personally. She brought her hands together, and a resplendent strand of sword chi slowly condensed between her palms. She was about to stab towards one of them. "Emperor Shi, please calm your anger. Please show mercy." At this moment, an old voice boomed out from the sky. It was as tremendous as thunder echoing through the surroundings. It did not fade away for a very long time. High up in the sky, the space distorted, and suddenly several figures appeared. Two ruddy old men stood at the very front. Their presences were concealed, making them seem like ordinary people. It was impossible to see through their cultivation. However, when the two of them stood there, the entire world seemed to pale in comparison. Even the light of the sun, moon, and stars seemed to dim. Behind the two old men was a middle-aged man in a nine-dragon sovereign robe. He had a dignified bearing and looked somewhat similar to the ninth prince. He was the emperor of the eternal Blood Sun Empire, known as the Blood Emperor. Behind Blood Emperor, there were a few experts from the royal family. At the same time, three ancient stone towers stood silently in a forbidden ground of the Shi dynasty in the distant northern region. Although the stone towers were not tall, they gave off a feeling that they were connected to the world. Around each stone tower was extremely powerful laws. Hao Xuan, Hao Ming, go to the southern region. No matter what, you can't embarrass our Shi Empire. At this moment, an old voice rang out from one of the stone towers. Grand Imperial Ancestor, Ziyun's long-lost daughter. An old voice rang out from another stone pagoda. "We found her," said the person in the first stone tower. "Have you found her?" "We finally found her. All these years, Ziyun has gone crazy for his daughter. Now, we can finally resolve one of the knots in his heart," the person in the second stone pagoda said, as if he had finally heaved a sigh of relief. The situation this time is rather complicated. With Ziyun's personality, he'll probably cause quite a lot of trouble. The two of you can't embarrass our Shi Empire this time, and you have to prevent Ziyun from causing any unmanageable situations. "Go," said the voice in the first stone tower. "Yes, Ancestral Emperor." The people in the other two stone towers replied together. With that, the auras of the two stone towers suddenly changed. The towering stone towers immediately became extremely ordinary, and the powerful laws in the surroundings completely vanished as well. The stone towers had already been emptied out. P.S. Please listen to Xiaoyao's Prestige. Once there are any updates in the future, Xiaoyao will inform you through Prestige. Search Xingxingxiao 110. It was not complicated. It was Xiaoyao's pseudonym and a police number. Chapter 1988. In the Dong, and province of the Divine Kingdom of Pingtian in the southern region, the ninth prince, who had been slapped far away by the empress, finally stopped worrying when he saw the Blood Emperor and the two old men before him. As if he had been pardoned, he flew up and arrived behind the Blood Emperor as quickly as he could. However, even though the reinforcements of the Blood Sun Empire had arrived, the ninth prince still seemed like he was running for his life when he saw how frantic he was. It was as if he was afraid that Emperor Shi and the Empress would stop him if he was too slow. This son greets Imperial Father and the two retired sage emperors. The ninth prince's expression was extremely respectful as he spoke with great difficulty. After taking two slaps from the Empress, his entire chin had been destroyed, so he could no longer speak clearly. The Blood Emperor of the Blood Sun Empire was dignified. He stared at the ninth prince emotionlessly, but there was no pity in his eyes at all. Instead, he said sternly, "Go to the back and stay there." He was straightforward and decisive. "Yes, father," the ninth prince replied politely. He felt very pained. He knew that his status in his father's heart was no longer the same as before after this matter. This filled him with bitterness. He only wanted to find a primordial realm expert who had stolen the Flower of Ways, but he had never thought that he would cause such a great matter. Even the great holy emperor of the empire had been alarmed. Emperor Shi stared at the two great holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire emotionlessly within the Tianyuan family. His eyes were cold as he said, "You've finally come. It saves the emperor the trouble of paying a personal visit to the imperial capital of your Blood Sun Empire. However, who do you want the emperor to show mercy to when you talk about showing mercy? Show mercy to the divine kings? Or show mercy to the prince who almost killed the emperor's daughter? Or perhaps you want the emperor to show mercy to your Blood Sun Empire?" Emperor Shi's tone was cold and filled with dense killing intent. Even though the two holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire were here, he was still extremely domineering. Faced with Emperor Shi's forceful attitude, the two holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire remained calm. One of them said, "Emperor Shi, please calm down. We have a rough idea of what happened. It is indeed our fault, but fortunately, it has not turned into a grave mistake. Our Blood Sun Empire will compensate Emperor Shi's beloved daughter for the harm she has suffered. I hope, Lord Emperor, she will be magnanimous and not lower yourself to our level." Emperor Shi's face suddenly sank, and his eyes burst out with monstrous killing intent. He shouted coldly, "When the Emperor came here, you had already lost an arm and suffered a very serious injury. There was not much life left in her body. Moreover, the people of your Blood Sun Empire actually dared to defile my daughter when she was so heavily injured. Isn't that a grave mistake? Or do you think that only Yuer's death is a grave mistake?" Emperor Shi became angrier and angrier as he spoke. At that moment, he seemed like an enraged tiger, filled with bloodlust. The expressions of the two holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire did not change at all. They looked at Emperor Shi calmly. One of them flipped his hand, and a droplet of green liquid immediately appeared on his hand. It pulsed with a mysterious power. Ever since the droplet of liquid appeared, the souls of everyone present trembled. An indescribable feeling of comfort appeared from the depths of their souls, as if they had ascended to a higher level. Even the Divine King and the primordial realm experts of the Heavenly Moon Empire were no exception. The invisible pulses from the droplet of liquid could actually affect infinite primes. It seems to be spiritual marrow of starry skies. An infinite prime from the imperial family of the Heavenly Moon Empire exclaimed. Spiritual marrow of starry skies was something that only existed in legends to infinite primes like them. Just how great a cultivator's future accomplishments and what heights they could reach on the path of cultivation were often related to the cultivator's talent and ability to comprehend. Comprehension was especially important in this regard. Cultivation required the comprehension of battle skills, the mysteries of the world, and the control of the laws of the world. All of this was related to a person's comprehension of the laws of the world. The greater a person's comprehension ability, the faster they could comprehend battle skills, and the easier it would be for them to comprehend the laws of the world. In the vast saint's world, countless people were stuck at reciprocity. They were clearly only a step away from godhood, but they would never be able to reach that step in their entire lives. This did not mean that their talent was lacking. Instead, their comprehension ability was lacking, preventing them from controlling the laws of the world and obtaining the key to godhood. After godhood, each increase in cultivation required a corresponding level of comprehension of the laws of the world. This was more than enough to demonstrate just how important a person's comprehension ability was on the path of cultivation. The spiritual marrow of starry skies just happened to be a supreme treasure that could increase a person's comprehension ability. Even to infinite primes, it was fatally tempting. This was because the increase in comprehension ability from the spiritual marrow of starry skies was not temporary. Like the comprehension tea tree, it was only effective for a certain amount of time. Instead, it was a permanent increase. Even if a person with poor talent consumed a droplet of spiritual marrow of starry skies, they would become a supreme genius with astonishing comprehension ability. Emperor Shi, you must know the value of this droplet of spiritual marrow of starry skies. I wonder if this droplet of spiritual marrow of starry skies can resolve your hatred, said the holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire. However, Emperor Shi did not waver at all. He said coldly, "Nothing can make up for the harm Yuer has suffered. A debt of blood must be repaid with blood." Emperor Shi was straightforward and decisive. He did not hesitate at all. Afterwards, he looked at Shi Yu and said, "You can do it. Kill these divine kings. I like to see just who dares to stop you." Towards the end, a powerful presence radiated from Emperor Shi, crushing towards the two holy emperors of the Blood Sun Empire in an overwhelming manner. The two grand saint emperors, who had displayed a carefree expression from the start, finally had a slight change in expression at this moment. Both of them frowned slightly. Behind them, the Blood Emperor glanced back slightly at the Ninth Prince. A sliver of coldness appeared in his dignified eyes, and he sighed inside. He thought, my ninth son has really gone too far this time. Of all the people he could offend, he just had to offend the Emperor Shi of the Shi dynasty. Shi hesitated slightly before striking out decisively. She killed off the divine kings mercilessly. The divine kings had their cultivations sealed up by the empress, so they were unable to dodge Shi Yu's attacks at all. They could only watch as death descended upon them. The two holy emperors of the Blood Sun Empire watched on. They did not choose to interfere. They understood Emperor Shi's personality to a certain degree. He was definitely a vicious person who did not care about the big picture and would do anything crazy for his daughter. He had massacred all the primordial realm experts of the Shi dynasty, personally killing all his brothers. That was the best evidence. Even the authoritative Grand Imperial Protector of the Shi Empire had not been able to avoid it. If they intervened to save the Divine Kings before such a vicious person, a battle between chaotic primes would definitely erupt. Very soon, all the Divine Kings who had come with the Ninth Prince were executed by Shi Yu. Sword Qi pierced their foreheads, dispersing their souls, wiping out their souls. They did not possess a powerful chaotic body like Jianshin, which allowed them to endure the attacks of overgods without being injured at all. Once their cultivation was sealed, even deities or origin realm cultivators would be able to harm them, let alone overgods. Emperor Shi, are you satisfied now? One of the holy emperors asked after all the divine kings were dead. Hand over the ninth prince. Emperor, she said emotionlessly. He spoke firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. This time, the two great elders of the Blood Sun Empire struggled to maintain their composure. Their faces changed slightly. Even the current emperor of the Blood Sun Empire, Blood Emperor, who was standing behind them, had a grave expression on his face. Regardless of what crimes the Ninth Prince had committed, the Ninth Prince was a direct descendant of the imperial family. He was the Blood Emperor's son. His life might not have mattered, but he represented the Blood Sun Empire. The hearts of the two holy emperors sank as well. They did not care about the Ninth Prince's death. What they truly cared about was the dignity of the Blood Sun Empire. Chapter 1989. Emperor Shi, we can't hand the current prince over to you. You've killed the divine kings as well, so you've avenged them. We'll use this droplet of spiritual marrow of stars as compensation for the grievances Emperor Shi's daughter has suffered. We'll let this matter go. What do you think, Emperor Shi? Said one of the holy emperors of the Blood Sun Empire. He was also determined, refusing to hand over the Ninth Prince. If their Blood Sun Empire really handed the Ninth Prince over to be executed just because the Shi Emperor's beloved daughter was slightly injured, their status in the southern region would definitely plummet from today onwards. Emperor Shi did not accept the offer at all. He snorted coldly. The true culprit behind you Er's injuries has yet to be dealt with, so how can we avenge them? Blood Sun Empire, Emperor Shi, I only want to ask you one thing. Will you hand over the person or not? Emperor Shi, your daughter is fine now, so why must you force us? Why must you make such a big fuss over such a trivial matter? Why must you do this? Said the holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire. As for the Blood Emperor, he had no right to speak before the two holy emperors. My daughter almost died from humiliation here. That's no small matter. Emperor Shi's face sank as killing intent filled his eyes. Afterwards, the presence of a ruler radiated from him. At that moment, he seemed like an overlord. He stared at the people from the Blood Sun Empire coldly and said in a dignified voice, if you don't hand over the person, my Shi dynasty will declare war on your Blood Sun Empire. Emperor Shi's words were shocking. It was just a short sentence, but it was like a clap of thunder, deeply shocking everyone present. At that moment, whether it was the people from the Tianyuan family, the Divine King, or the primordial realm experts from the Heavenly Moon Empire, they were all shocked. They all looked at Emperor Shi in disbelief. The Shi dynasty and the Blood Sun Empire represented the North region and the South region respectively. They were both top-notch empires that ruled over their own regions. Once a war broke out between the two eternal empires, it would directly evolve into a war between the two regions. Emperor, she had actually declared war on the Blood Sun dynasty without any regard for the consequences for his beloved daughter. This made everyone in the Blood Sun dynasty pale. Lunatic. This emperor, she, is a lawless lunatic. Although his daughter has been slightly injured, she's standing beside him in perfect condition. Yet, he wants to declare war on our Blood Sun Empire. Does he not know how severe the consequences of war between two eternal empires will be? The Blood Emperor glared at Emperor Shi as he cursed inside. Probably only the current Emperor Shi of the Shi dynasty could do something so absurd. The two great holy emperors of the Blood Sun Empire became stern as well. The emperors of eternal empires always kept to their word. Since an emperor of an eternal empire had declared war, it was definitely not a joke. Instead, he had really made up his mind. No matter how mentally tough the ninth prince was, he still paled as he stood behind the Blood Emperor. He had never thought that just injuring an overgod from a small clan would lead to a war between two eternal empires. This frightened the ninth prince. As the person who had caused all this, Shi stared at Emperor Shi with extremely mixed feelings. She was filled with mixed feelings. Even she was unable to describe what she was feeling right now. As for the members of the upper echelon of the Tianyuan family, it went without saying. Many of them had become dumbfounded. The two ancestral emperors looked at each other as they furrowed their brows tightly. They felt rather troubled when they faced the Shi emperor, who completely disregarded the big picture and was willing to do anything for his daughter, even going as far as to throw in an eternal empire. Ziyun, don't be impatient. At this moment, an old voice rang out from outer space. With that, the space beside Emperor Shi rippled slightly, and two ruddy old men appeared silently. They were Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming, who had come from the Shi dynasty. They were both great holy emperors of the Shi dynasty. Shi Haoshuan was the father of the current emperor, Shi Ziyun. Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming's appearance did not cause Emperor Shi's expression to change at all. Instead, the empress immediately became respectful. She pulled Shiyu over and bowed towards Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming first before looking at Shiyu. She said gently, this is your grandfather and great-grandfather. Why don't you greet them? No, he's not worthy to be your grandfather. However, Emperor Shi appeared before Shiyu as soon as the empress finished speaking. He spoke emotionlessly. A bitter expression immediately appeared on Shi Haoshuan's face when he heard this. He sighed softly before his elderly eyes stared at Shiyu and observed her. His gaze contained some kindness. Ziyun, the matter of declaring war has too many implications. You can't mention it so casually, Shi Haoming said sternly to Emperor Shi. I'm the current emperor, as well as one of the holy emperors of the Shi dynasty. I have the right to make decisions. If the Blood Sun Empire refuses to hand over the person, then I can only declare war. Emperor, she said coldly. He showed no respect to anyone. Shi Haoming also sighed when he saw how determined Emperor Shi was. His face was filled with helplessness. He felt rather helpless against Emperor Shi. As the great holy emperor of the Shi dynasty, they were supreme existences. They represented the supreme authority of an eternal empire. If an emperor dared to disobey them, they could even remove him from his position with a single word. However, Shi Ziyun was rather special. He was so special that even Shi Haoming and Shi Haoshuan, his two seniors, were forced to accommodate him most of the time. Ziyun, let me negotiate with the Blood Sun Empire and try to come up with a perfect solution, Shi Haoming said to Emperor Shi. In the southern region, in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, Jinshin and Kea quickly made their way through a bustling street. They made their way to the very center of the imperial capital. It was closest to the imperial palace of the Blood Sun Empire, so it was one of the safest places in the southern region. The Blood Sun Empire is the ruler of the southern region. It's the only eternal empire. The imperial capital is of utmost importance to the Blood Sun Empire, so it's naturally forbidden to fight. I hope Huayan will fear this place, Jinshin thought. He had become the target of a vice leader of the heavenly demon religion. He felt a great sense of danger at all times. Chapter 1990. After arriving in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, Jianshun considered his next step. Although the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire was the safest place in the southern region right now, it was not a place where he could stay for long. After all, what happened in the Een Mountains of Seven's despair had already caused him to fall out with the ninth prince of the Blood Sun Empire. Coming here meant that he was even closer to the ninth prince. Apart from that, although Huayan feared the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, it was only fear. However, if Huayan truly dared to act recklessly, the Blood Sun Empire would not be able to do anything to him. After all, the heavenly demon religion behind Huai and was supported by an extremely terrifying Great Elder. Let alone the eternal Blood Sun Empire. Even the peak clans on the Cloud Plain did not dare to provoke the Great Elder so easily. Apart from the central region, the other four regions probably aren't completely safe on the Cloud Plain right now. Do I have to go to the central region? Jianxin thought. As soon as the central region was mentioned, he could not help but think of Tong Tian. Tong Tian's Tong family was also in the central region. Even now, he still possessed the jade pendant that Tong Tian had given him. No, I definitely can't go to the central region. The vice leader of the heavenly demon religion, Huayan, has already personally come to hunt me down. It's obvious that he views me as a thorn in his side. If I go to the central region, he'll definitely pursue me. Once I lead him to the central region, it'll unknowingly increase the danger Uncle Xiao faces. Uncle Xiao possesses the 9 blood beads and soul beads that the heavenly demon religion has spent countless years refining. This matter is just too great. If the people of the heavenly demon religion learn about it, the consequences will be unthinkable. As a result, I can't go in the end. I can't increase the threat Uncle Xiao poses at all. Jianxin frowned. He discovered that although the Cloud Plain was large, there was actually nowhere he could go right now. This was all because the organization behind Huayan was just too great. Otherwise, even though he could move about freely in the southern region with his strength as an infinite prime, he would not be taken seriously by eternal empires. Jianshun, I've heard that there are a total of 49 great plains and 81 great planets in the Saints' world. Our Cloud Plain is only one of the 49 great plains. Since we can't stay on the Cloud Plain anymore, why don't we leave the Cloud Plain temporarily and return once we have enough strength? Kaya said. Although she had not been in the Saints' world for very long, she already had a basic understanding of the Saints' world. She had also learned about the strength of the heavenly demon religion from Jianxin. As a result, she understood just how troublesome it was to be targeted by a primordial realm expert from the heavenly demon religion. Kaya paused and pondered for a moment before continuing. Moreover, with our cultivation speed, I believe that it won't be long before we possess a cultivation that allows us to not fear Huai and leave the Cloud Plain. A sliver of bitterness appeared on Jinshin's face. Leaving the Cloud Plain was easier said than done. He did not have 5-color divine crystals to pay for teleportation formations across planes. Teleportation formations across planes were extremely expensive. In the past, Fairy Hao Yue had only obtained enough 5-color divine crystals to support her return home after killing an extremely powerful primordial realm expert in the Xiandao dynasty. Although Jianshun still had some supreme-grade divine crystals from Yashu Lian, they were still not enough to take teleportation formations across planes after exchanging them for 5-color divine crystals. At this moment, Jianshun and Kaya's expressions both changed. They suddenly looked back and saw 3 strands of surging demonic aura at the end of the busy street. They rapidly approached Jianshun and Kaya. What powerful demonic aura! It's people from the heavenly demon religion. It's the divine king realm experts of the heavenly demon religion. They've actually come to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. The heavenly demon religion is just too arrogant. They've come to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, yet they don't know how to behave themselves. They're basically looking down on the Blood Sun Empire. The arrival of the 3 late Divine King realm experts of the heavenly demon religion immediately attracted the attention of many people in the imperial capital. However, Even though many people looked at the three divine kings of the heavenly demon religion with displeasure, no one dared to stand forward, as if they were afraid that others would not know they were part of the heavenly demon religion. The three divine kings of the heavenly demon religion did not behave themselves even though they were in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. The late divine kings' presences radiated as demonic aura surged around them. They were enveloped by a dense, black mist, making it impossible to see them clearly. At the same time, on a bustling street several kilometers away from Jianshan, a white-robed young man who seemed to be in his 30s and held a fan in his hand walked around with two female attendants in a leisurely manner. When the three divine king realm experts of the heavenly demon religion entered the imperial capital, the young man came to a halt. He frowned and said, "The heavenly demon religion is just too arrogant. What do they take the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire for? It's not a place where they can behave atrociously. Your Majesty, from the looks of it, they're probably looking for someone who has offended them. It's just a small matter, so just bear with it. Don't make a big deal out of it," one of the female attendants said softly from behind the young man. The young man's face sank, and he suddenly slammed his fan down. He said, "If we can even bear with something like this, where will the dignity of our imperial family go?" Jianshan and Kea both became stern when they sensed the three divine king realm experts in pursuit. Jianshan called out, "They've arrived much faster than I imagined. Look at how they're behaving. They don't seem to take the Blood Sun Empire seriously at all. They'll probably directly attack us in the imperial capital. Let's go." Jianshan immediately flew away with Kea, approaching the imperial palace of the Blood Sun Empire. However, the two of them were unable to fly in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. They could only fly at a low altitude on the streets, so their speed was obviously greatly affected. "Do you think you'll be fine if you escape to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire? You're far too naive." At this moment, a deep voice rang out from behind. The three divine king realm experts from the heavenly demon religion had already locked onto Jianshan's presence. They did not fear Jianshan at all in the imperial capital. Their speed suddenly skyrocketed, and they directly flew through the air. In the blink of an eye, they passed over Jianshan and Kea, landing in front of the two of them, blocking their path. "The vice leader has personally ordered for your capture. Even if you run to the ends of the world, you won't be able to escape from the grasp of our heavenly demon religion. Just surrender," sneered one of the divine king realm experts from the heavenly demon religion. With that, he directly attacked Jianshan and Kea. Clearly, he did not want to waste too much time. After all, this was the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Although their statuses could deter others to a certain extent, it would still be very disadvantageous for them if they wasted too much time. Jianshan and Kea became extremely stern. Jianshan equipped his god artifact as soon as possible and circulated his chaotic force, pushing the defenses of his chaotic body to the limit. Even the cracked, startling rainbow sword appeared in his hand. Heavenly demon religion, you really are getting bolder and bolder. At this moment, a cold snort rang out. With a flash, a white-robed young man with a fan suddenly appeared before Jianshan and Kea. The young man's face did not change at all when he faced the attacks of the three divine king realm experts from the heavenly demon religion. He directly swung his fan forward. Immediately, the wind and clouds in the surroundings surged. It was as if the world had been turned upside down by the young man's fan. The power of laws within the young man's fan seemed to affect the space there, causing it to become rather different. The attacks from the three divine king realm experts from the heavenly demon religion were all repelled without any prior signs when they came in contact with the space there. The attacks that originally targeted Jianshan and Kea were redirected towards them instead. The expressions of the three divine king realm experts changed slightly. However, they were battle-hardened after all. Even though it had happened suddenly, they still managed to react in the shortest amount of time possible. The laws of the divine king realm descended and struck out a second time, nullifying the attacks that had been repelled. Chapter 1991. The young man had nullified the attacks of the three late divine king from the heavenly demon religion all by himself. Moreover, he remained composed and did not seem to be at a disadvantage at all. Clearly, he was extremely powerful. As Jianshan encountered more and more divine kings and clashed with them several times, he had gained some understanding of the strength of a divine king. When a young man struck out, he could clearly sense that he was also a late divine king as he blocked the attacks of the three young men from the heavenly demon religion all by himself. Given that the young man was able to hold his ground against an enemy of the same level of cultivation, he had to be a supreme prodigy as well. The imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire really is filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Just a random person is so powerful. Jianshan was secretly surprised. Demonic aura surged from the three divine king from the heavenly demon religion. Dense, black mist obscured their figures. One of them growled, "Who are you? How dare you get in the way of our heavenly demon religion? Back off immediately, and we can let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, you'll be making an enemy of our heavenly demon religion." The heavenly demon religion had always been tyrannical on the Cloud Plane. Even when they came to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, they did not hold back at all. They were completely fearless. The young man with the folding fan opened it and slowly fanned himself nonchalantly. He sneered, "Aren't you looking down on the Blood Sun Empire a little too much? Why don't you take a look at where you are before saying that? How dare you threaten me in my territory? Let alone you three insignificant protectors. Even the vice patriarch of your heavenly demon religion would have to think twice before coming here." At this moment, a large group of guards from the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire hurried over from the surroundings. Several divine king had also flown out from the imperial palace, approaching with lightning speed. In just a few breaths of time, the three divine kings of the heavenly demon religion were completely surrounded. The several divine kings from the Blood Sun dynasty's imperial palace all had cold gazes as they trapped the three divine kings. Their powerful auras were slowly being released. Even though they were surrounded, the three protectors of the Empyrean demon cult remained composed. They did not panic at all. One of them said, "The vice leader has personally ordered the capture of these two people. Does your Blood Sun Empire want to protect them? I don't have the slightest interest in who your vice sect leader is arresting. However, this is the imperial capital of the Blood Sun dynasty. It's not a place where you can do as you please. In the southern region, your heavenly demon religion can't cover the sky. Please return, or I'll have to get someone to kick you out of the imperial capital," the young man in white said coldly. After a moment of thought, the three protectors of the heavenly demon religion could only retreat helplessly in the end after coming to a decision about the current situation. After the three protectors of the heavenly demon religion had retreated, Jianshan clasped his fist at the young man and said, "I am Jianshan. Thank you for your assistance. I will remember your kindness today." Jianshan? The young man's eyes immediately narrowed when he heard Jianshan's name. He stared at Jianshan in some surprise and said, "You're the Jianshan who defeated a divine king in the northern region?" "That's me," said Jianshan. The young man smiled and studied Jianshan. He said, "No wonder the three protectors of the heavenly demon religion pursued you with your cultivation as an overgod. When you captured Yashi Lian, you made the divine king use her as a hostage, forcing Huayan to yield. With Huayan's personality, he'll definitely hold a grudge. Moreover, you're a supreme overgod on the overgod's plaque. Your talent is impressive, so you'll pose quite a threat to the heavenly demon religion in the future. Huayan will definitely move against you. Out of the three vice leaders of the heavenly demon religion, Huayan is the most narrow-minded and vengeful. If Huayan sets his eyes on you, you need to be careful." When he spoke up to this point, the young man's voice came to an abrupt halt. His eyes stared into the distance as his expression became solemn. He said, "Looks like Huayan values you far more than I expected. He's actually come in person. Jianshan, you better leave quickly." As a vice leader of the heavenly demon religion, Huayan knows various secret techniques. Coupled with his cultivation as an infinite prime, he can deal with you without breaking the rules of our Blood Sun Empire. Huayan had arrived extremely quickly. Before the young man had even finished speaking, he had appeared on the street silently. He stared at Jianshan coldly. "Jianshan, on the other hand, did not hesitate at all. He left as quickly as he could with Kaya, disappearing from the street in an instant. The young man in white stood before Huayan and said indifferently, "I never thought that the renowned vice leader of the heavenly demon religion, Huayan, would personally come to our Blood Sun Empire. I just wonder if our Blood Sun Empire should treat you with courtesy and treat you as an esteemed guest, or should we stand our ground and directly ask you to leave? Vice Leader Huayan, you're making things very difficult for me." Huayan was about to chase after Jianshun when he saw the young man stand before him. He immediately frowned. Although he did not recognize the young man did not fear him, even though he was just a divine king. Coupled with the fact that he mentioned the Blood Sun Empire earlier, Huayan immediately realized that the young man was probably a member of the imperial family, and his status was quite high. However, so what if his status was high? Huayan was the vice leader of the heavenly demon religion. Even the great holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire had to fear him a little. Huayan immediately snorted coldly and said, "We're here to capture a criminal, so we don't have the time to tangle with you. Leave immediately, or don't blame us for being merciless." As he said that, the pressure of a primordial realm expert radiated from Huayan, pressing towards the young man. "Huayan, this is the Blood Sun Empire, not your heavenly demon religion. If you continue to act so recklessly, I can only chase you out of the imperial city." Just when Huayan released the pressure of the primordial realm, a loud and clear voice rang out from the imperial palace of the Blood Sun Empire. "I naturally know the rules of your Blood Sun Empire. My visit this time has nothing to do with your Blood Sun Empire. As long as you don't get in my way, I naturally won't break the rules of your Blood Sun Empire," Huayan replied coldly. He no longer paid any more attention to the young man, vanishing with a flash as he chased after Jianshun. The young man stared in the direction that Huayan had vanished in, and a sliver of reluctance appeared in his eyes. He said to the imperial palace, "Imperial advisor, that Jianshun is a prodigy of our southern region after all. He'll definitely become an expert who reigns supreme in the future. Are we supposed to just watch as Jianshun is framed by the heavenly demon religion and do nothing about it? There are countless prodigies in the saints' world, and there are even quite a few unprecedented figures. However, just how many of them can reach the apex in the end? Even if they're first on the Overgod's plaque or first on the Divine King's throne, there are still examples of them dying along the way. There's no need to offend the heavenly demon religion over something like this." The deep and clear voice rang out once again from the imperial palace of the Blood Sun Empire, but only the young man could hear it. At this moment, Jianshun and Kaya moved through the imperial palace quickly. They did their best to increase the distance between them and Huayan as they thought about how to deal with the situation. However, at this moment, Jianshun and Kaya both stopped. They looked ahead. A ruddy old man in white robes stood before them. He stared at Jianshun and Kaya with a strange light in his eyes. "Chanlong, why are you here?" Kaya asked. He was surprised. The old man was Master Chanlong, who had some conflicts with Jianshun in the past. However, when the 7 protectors of the Earth Spirit sect killed their way into the provincial city, Jianshun felt grateful towards Master Chanlong for protecting Kaya. As a result, Jianshun's grievances towards Master Chanlong gradually dissipated. Jianshun was extremely surprised to see Chanlong here. Master Chanlong became extremely stern. He said sternly, "I know you're in extremely great trouble. Don't say anything right now. Come with me." Before he had even finished speaking, Master Chanlong turned around and left. Jianshun and Kaya looked at each other. Although they had no idea what Master Chanlong was planning, they clearly had no other choice right now. They could only follow behind Master Chanlong. Under Chanlong's lead, Jianshun's group arrived at an extremely huge square in the imperial capital very soon. Just the square was several dozen kilometers wide, and there was a sea of people gathered there. The most eye-catching thing was that at the very center of the square, there was an extremely huge flying artifact parked there. It was several dozen kilometers long and several tens of thousands of meters tall. It was like a towering mountain floating in the air, almost filling up the entire square. Just a glance at it gave off an extremely powerful sense of oppression. Take this and board the ship with me. As long as you board the spatial battleship, we'll be safe for now. Master Chanlong passed a Jade talisman to Kea and Jianshun before flying towards the spatial battleship with them. A spatial battleship. A sliver of doubt appeared in Jianshun's eyes. He glanced at the colossal flying vehicle and flew towards the spatial battleship with Chanlong in confusion. At a time like this, he no longer cared about the uses of the spatial battleship. As long as he could shake off the pursuit of an infinite prime, he would go even if he had to go through a sea of flames. Jianshun, stay behind. Just when Jianshun was about to board the spatial battleship, a thunderous bellow boomed in his head. Terrifying sound waves echoed through Jianshun's head, shaking up Jianshun's soul to the point where it almost collapsed. His consciousness became blurry, and the chaotic force within him paused at that moment. He almost fell out of the sky. Vice Leader Huai had already hurried over from behind. He stared at Jianshun with a sunken face. When Kea saw this, he immediately grabbed Jianshun's shoulder and flew towards the cabin door of the spatial battleship. Don't even think about leaving the cloud plane. Huai's face was ashen. At that moment, he no longer cared about breaking the rules of the Blood Sun Empire. With a raise of his hand, he reached towards Jianshun from afar. As he extended his hand, his entire arm elongated. His hand turned into a black cloud, blotting out the surroundings and trapping space. It enveloped Jianshun and Kea. Chapter 1992. This was the second time Huai had attacked Jianshun and Kea. The first time, he had only struck out casually. He did not actually want to injure Jianshun and Kea. Instead, he only wanted to draw out the hidden Divine King. As a result, Jianshun and Kea were still able to fight back then. Even though their attacks were as insignificant as ants to primordial realm experts, they could still fight back at the very least. However, this time, when Huai saw Jianshun and Kea were about to enter the spatial battleship, he directly struck out furiously in a moment of panic after understanding how powerful the spatial battleship was. The strike was so powerful that it completely surpassed the first time he had attacked Jianshun and Kea. Just the tremendous pressure from the strike was enough to immobilize Kea and Jianshun. Master Chanlong's expression suddenly changed as well. He wanted to save Kea, but there was nothing he could do when a primordial realm expert personally took action. Huai, you're looking down on the Blood Sun Empire far too much. It looks like it's time for your heavenly demon religion's arrogance to be quelled. At this moment, an old voice rang out. A red-robed old man appeared silently above the spatial battleship. Even though the old man had concealed his presence, making it impossible to see through his cultivation or detect his existence, when he appeared in the sky, it was as if he had become one with the sky. The old man stared at Huai coldly. He raised his right hand calmly and extended a finger towards the huge hand that reached towards Jianshun and Kea. The finger seemed very simple. It did not give off any ripples of energy, nor did it give off any pressure. However, the space before the old man suddenly shrank as he extended his finger. A spatial ripple spread out at an unbelievable speed. Huai's huge hand suddenly came to a halt when it was only 10 meters away from Jianshun and Kea. The surrounding space seemed to freeze at that moment. However, the power of the old man's finger clearly did not stop there. In the next moment, the space there shattered loudly with a violent pulse. A huge spatial crack appeared, and countless spatial blades and violent spatial storms surged out in all directions, enveloping Huai's hand. The spatial blades and spatial storms were extremely terrifying. They possessed terrifying offensive power, and Huai's hand was reduced to a bloody mess in the blink of an eye. Huai's eyes were icy cold as he stared at the old man without any expression. His right hand had been trapped by the old man, enduring the attacks of the spatial blades and spatial storms. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to free his hand from the space that had been trapped. However, he ignored his right hand soon after. He looked at Jianshun, and his killing intent immediately skyrocketed. With a thought, a sword immediately appeared above his head. It was completely red, as if it had been drenched in blood. As soon as it appeared, it gave off an extremely heavy smell of blood. Vaguely, it seemed to be able to hear the roars of countless vengeful spirits and the struggles of countless vengeful spirits. Clearly, the sword had been stained with an unknown amount of blood. It had completely transformed into a demonic armament. Swish! As soon as the red sword appeared, it turned into a red bolt of lightning. It directly tore through space and shot toward Jianshun with unbelievable speed. Huayan's killing intent towards Jianshun had reached a limit. Now that Jianshun was about to step onto a spatial battleship and leave the cloud plane, how could he let him go? As a result, he basically wanted to kill Jianshun at all costs, even if it meant offending the eternal Blood Sun Empire, even if it meant losing an arm. The red sword moved extremely quickly, so quickly that it seemed like space did not exist before it. In a flash, it appeared before Jianshun and shot toward Jianshun's head with a monstrous smell of blood. However, it was also at this moment that the space around Jianshun and Kea trembled slightly. On the line between life and death, Jianshun and Kea vanished, causing the blood-red sword to miss. Huayan glanced at the huge cabin door of the spatial battleship slightly. He saw that Jianshun and Kea had silently appeared outside and were about to enter. This person is a serious criminal of our heavenly demon religion. He is involved in a major matter that has happened recently. If you stop me, you will become an enemy of our heavenly demon religion. We will definitely report this matter. Once the Great Elder is alerted, your Blood Sun Empire will not be able to bear the consequences. Huayan roared out furiously. With a thought, the blood-red sword flashed and continued towards Jianshun. He was not afraid of actually killing Jianshun. His demonic armament possessed the ability to suck away souls. Anyone killed by the sword could choose whether to directly obliterate their souls through his will. As long as Jianshun was injured by the sword, even if it was just a scratch, his demonic armament could suck away Jianshun's soul in a single instance. The red-robed old man was unfazed by Huayan's threat. He said, "Do you think you can scare the old man by bringing up the Great Elder of your heavenly demon religion? What's even more laughable is that a mere over-god can alert the Great Elder, who rarely shows himself. Huayan, don't you think your words are rather childish and laughable?" As he said that, the old man reached out with his hand. With that, the entire world seemed to be in his grasp. The blood-red sword that shot towards Jianshun silently appeared in the old man's hand as well. The old man gripped the sword with 2 fingers. No matter how the sword struggled, it was unable to break free from the old man's grasp. At this moment, Kea had already grabbed Jianshun by the shoulder and entered the cabin with Chanlong. They vanished from Huayan's sight. Huayan's face was terrifyingly sunken. He understood the power of the spatial battleship very well. Once Jianshun entered the spatial battleship, it would mean that he had lost the opportunity to kill Jianshun unless Jianshun came out of there. As the spatial battleship moved through the endless space, it would naturally encounter various dangers. It could even be attacked by extremely powerful space beasts. Chapter 1993. As for tailing the spatial battleship and waiting for Jianshun to disembark before killing him, that was even more impossible. This was because once the spatial battleship entered outer space, even 9th Heavenly Layer Infinite Primes would not be able to catch up to it. Probably only chaotic primes would be able to keep up with the spatial battleship. After all, this was a transportation tool used across the 49 Great Plains and 81 Great Planets of the Saints' World. It was naturally extremely fast. Outside the spatial battleship, Huayan stared at Jianshun, who had already vanished into the cabin with a sunken face. His hatred for the red-robed old man who had stopped him reached the limit. If it were not for the fact that the red-robed old man had stopped him time and time again, Jianshun would have ended up in his hands already. Unfortunately, even though they were both infinite primes, he was nowhere near as powerful as the red-robed old man. As a result, he could only bury his hatred deep inside. "Huayan, leave the imperial capital immediately," said the red-robed old man. His indifferent voice was cold. The Empyrean demon cult was an existence that many organizations on the cloud plane detested. If it were not for the fact that they feared the mysterious and terrifying Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult, it would have been impossible for the Empyrean demon cult to still exist after what they had done on the cloud plane. Only now did Hawaiian pull back his right hand. His entire right hand had vanished. However, he ignored the wound on his right arm. He glanced at the red-robed old man emotionlessly before snorting coldly. He directly left. He had already lost the chance to kill Jianshin. At this moment, Jianshin's soul that had been shaken up by Huaiyan's thunderous roar gradually recovered. Under Master Chanlong's lead, he moved through the spatial battleship before finally stopping in an extremely large cabin. This cabin was clearly located at the bottom of the spatial battleship. Several hundred stone platforms the size of cushions were placed in an orderly manner in the cabin. Currently, quite a few people were seated on the stone platforms. As for Jianshin and Kaya, they were led by Master Chanlong to 3 of the stone platforms. What is this place? Jianshin looked around in confusion. Master Chanlong sat on the stone platform beside Jianshin. He said to Jianshin and Kaya secretly, "This is a spatial battleship. It's an extremely famous large-scale transportation tool in the Saints' world. It's specially used for interplanar travel. Although there are teleportation formations that can cross the distance between planes in the Saints' world, it's extremely expensive. Even some primordial realm experts can't afford it. On the other hand, spatial battleships are much cheaper than interplanar teleportation formations. Even some gods can afford it. The only downside is that it's much slower than using teleportation formations. If you use teleportation formations to cross planes, you can reach your destination in an extremely short amount of time, no matter how far apart the planes are. On the other hand, spatial battleships will take years, decades, or even centuries or millennia to reach their destination. Master Chanlong clearly had an extremely detailed understanding of spatial battleships. He explained to Jianshin and Kaya from one side. When Jianshin learnt that he was about to leave the cloud plane on the spatial battleship, he fell silent. His mind was heavy, and his face was filled with worry. Everything had happened too suddenly. He was still unprepared. In particular, the Tianyuan family filled him with worry. This was because Ruijin, Hongyan, Blackfish, Newbies, CU, and the others who had come up with him from the Tianyuan continent were still with the Tianyuan family. Now, I can only hope that the Divine King can protect the Tianyuan family, Jianshin thought as his heart filled with bitterness. He had never thought that Huaiyan, one of the vice leaders of the heavenly demon religion, a great primordial realm expert, would personally hunt down a mere overgod like him. He was indeed powerless against the pursuit of a primordial realm expert with his current strength. As a matter of fact, even fleeing was an extravagant hope. If it were not for the fact that Huaiyan was kept busy by the experts of the Blood Sun Empire, he would not even have been able to set foot on the spatial battleship. I have no choice but to leave this time. Huaiyan, I will return. Jianshin clenched his fists as his gaze became extremely piercing. At the same time, not only was the central region of the cloud plane the center of the entire plane, but it was also the most prosperous place on the cloud plane. Most of the peak organizations that stood at the apex of the cloud plane resided in the central region. Moreover, the only everlasting empire on the cloud plane resided in the central region. At this moment, the red-robed Houston fled in horrible shape in a desolate region of the central region. He was covered in wounds, and every single one of them was vicious and terrifying. Blood constantly flowed from them as he faced the merciless pursuit of over a dozen Divine King. Behind him, the Divine King stared at Houston with burning desire. They pursued Houston as they fought against the Divine King beside them. All of them wanted to approach Houston first, but none of them wanted to be faster than the people beside them. Once they reached the very front, they would be mercilessly attacked by the people beside them or the people behind them. As a result, even though there were over a dozen Divine King pursuing an overgod, none of them were able to catch up to Houston due to the people beside them. This god artifact is fated to be mine. All of you piss off. If anyone dares to stop me, I'll definitely visit them one by one once this is over. The Divine King bellowed out furiously. The eyes of many of them had turned red. Houston's God artifact made their hearts beat faster. They were so excited that their blood began to boil. God artifacts were things that even many primordial realm experts did not possess. To the Divine King, the temptation was fatal. Up ahead, Houston constantly coughed up blood. After coming to the central region, he originally wanted to find a secluded place to cultivate, but he had never thought that he would come across a powerful, vicious beast in the wilderness, forcing him to use Amagami to deal with it. It was also at this moment that Amagami happened to be discovered by a divine king who passed by. He became greedy and exposed Houston's God artifact. Houston was not the divine king's opponent at all. If it were not for Amagami's assistance, he probably would not even be able to flee. As a result, he fled with Amagami's assistance. Faced with the pursuit of a divine king, he had to rely on Amagami's assistance, where he probably would have ended up in the divine king's hands long ago. Chapter 1994. A god artifact has actually appeared here? At this moment, a heavy voice rang out in the surroundings, reverberating through the surroundings. It was impossible to find the source of the voice. With that, an extremely tremendous pressure permeated the surroundings, filling the entire region. Just the pressure alone made Houston's entire body sink. A feeling of suffocation came over him. In front of this pressure, he actually found it hard to breathe. The pressure was just too terrifying to him. It was like a primordial beast, completely incomparable to the divine king pursuing him. The moment the pressure appeared, the faces of the god kings who were fighting for Houston's god artifact all froze. They could not help but stop. A middle-aged man appeared silently near Houston. He gave off a tremendous and terrifying presence, as if he could destroy the world with just a raise of his hand. At this moment, the middle-aged man was slightly excited. He also stared at the god artifact in Houston's hand with burning desire. He murmured, "Although it's only a demonic god artifact, it's still a god artifact after all, and it seems to be of quite high quality." The middle-aged man suddenly laughed aloud when he reached there. He could not hide his excitement at all. He said, "The heavens really are helping me. The heavens really are helping me. I've been in the primordial realm for so many years, but I've never been able to obtain a god artifact. I never thought I would come across one today in such a remote place. It looks like the heavens are treating me well. Looks like I'll have to disappoint you. You're destined to not obtain this god artifact." At this moment, another voice rang out. A black-clothed young man appeared near the middle-aged man. His face was cold, and his eyes were filled with a powerful, baleful aura. No one dared to look him in the eye. "Ha! God artifacts are things that even many infinite primes don't possess. Since I've come across one, how can this old man miss out on it? Moreover, it's a god artifact of quite a high quality." After the black-clothed young man, another old man appeared. His face was full of wrinkles, and his body was bent, giving people a feeling that he was too weak to stand up to the wind. The three of them hovered in the air in a triangular formation, surrounding Houston, who held the Amagami. The three of them did not even glance at the divine king who had pursued Houston earlier. As a matter of fact, even Houston was like air in their eyes. The only thing in their eyes was the Empyrean demon orb. There's only one god artifact, but there are three of us. How do you think we should split this god artifact? The hunched old man who had appeared in the end chuckled. When he glanced at the Amagami, he did not hide his desire. This god artifact naturally belongs to the capable," said the black-clothed young man coldly. With that, he immediately appeared before Houston. He extended his hand, trapping the surroundings as he directly reached towards Amagami. When a young man moved, Houston's body tensed up. The tremendous pressure immobilized him. Even with Amagami's assistance, he was still powerless before the young man. The young man was just too powerful. In Houston's eyes, he was like the ruler of the world. He was so powerful that he could not be defeated. At the same time, the hunched old man and the middle-aged man moved as well. They basically appeared beside Houston at the same time as the black-clothed young man, reaching towards Amagami. A terrifying pressure spread out from their bodies, pressuring Houston to the point that his heart seemed to have stopped beating. The blood in his body was being squeezed out from the pores all over his body. Before the three of them, It was impossible for Houston to escape. Even if he could control Amagami, he would be as insignificant as an ant. Even though Amagami was a god artifact of quite a high quality, it was impossible for Houston to unleash its power with his strength. In reality, let alone Houston, even a divine king would struggle to control a god artifact. Even if he had gained the recognition of the artifact's spirit, the divine king would not be able to unleash its power with his cultivation. Only in the hands of a primordial realm expert would a god artifact be able to unleash its devastating power as much as it wanted. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, a large golden cauldron suddenly appeared and covered Houston with lightning speed. The expressions of the three people who originally reached towards Amagami changed slightly when they saw this. They snorted coldly and struck out with their palms with devastating power towards the cauldron. Boom! With a deafening rumble, terrifying energy ripped through space, causing the space around the cauldron to crack. Cracks appeared in the space around the cauldron. Pitch-black spatial cracks intertwined with each other, spreading out like a huge spider web. The terrifying shockwaves of energy turned into a storm of destruction that wreaked havoc in all directions, causing the ground below to shake violently. Mountains 100 kilometers away collapsed. Even the nearby god kings were forced back time and time again by the powerful shockwaves of energy. All of them were surrounded by laws as they did their best to block the shockwaves. The golden cauldron shone brightly as well. It radiated with earth-shaking pulses of energy, causing the surroundings to pale. At the same time, the golden cauldron radiated with the unique presence of a god artifact. A god artifact! The black-robed young man's eyes narrowed. He stared at the golden cauldron that was completely unscathed after receiving attacks from the three of them. He was stern. "Sir, you already possess a god artifact. Are you still not satisfied with that? Do you want to compete with us for this one?" The hunchbacked old man growled. A white-robed young man hovered above the golden cauldron. He said emotionlessly, "I want to take this person away." With that, the young man waved his hand, and the cauldron around Houston immediately shrank to the size of a fist and flew into the young man's hand. The young man directly left with the cauldron. Don't even think about leaving. Behind him, the three infinite primes chased after him, but they lost sight of the young man very soon. Houston had completely lost his sense of the outside world the moment the cauldron enveloped him. At the same time, he could not sense the flow of time. The surroundings were pitch black. There was no light at all. After who knew how long, Houston suddenly felt his surroundings brighten up. He discovered that he had actually arrived on a mountain peak. The origin energy in the surroundings was extremely abundant, having already turned into mist that permeated the surroundings. "The Peak Lord wants to see you. Come with me." At this moment, a voice rang out from Houston. The white-robed young man who had saved Houston studied Houston with a strange light in his eyes before speaking indifferently. Afterwards, he directly made his way to the top of the mountain. "Senior, where is this place?" Houston asked. He knew that the young man was powerful. If the young man really wanted to deal with him, he would not be able to escape no matter what. As a result, he followed the young man to the top of the mountain. At the same time, he took out a few healing pills and ingested them. Heaven's Link Peak. The white-robed young man was a man of few words. After saying the location, he did not say anything else. They remained silent for the rest of the journey. Houston directly made his way to the top of the mountain with the blood-soaked young man. He arrived at a stone pavilion on the edge of a cliff. A sagely old man with white hair and ruddy complexion sat on a stone bench there with his eyes closed. He did not move at all like a statue. The white-robed young man stood outside the stone pavilion. He clasped his hands at the old man politely and said, "Peak Lord, I've brought him here." The old man slowly opened his eyes and glanced at Houston casually. It was also at this moment that his indifferent gaze seemed to change. Fragments of time seemed to fly through his eyes. The world seemed to reverse, and the origin of the universe seemed to evolve. He seemed to have seen Houston's past and future with a single glance. Afterwards, he looked at the Empyrean demon orb, and he finally became cautious. Houston, there's no need to worry. You'll be very safe on Heaven's Link Peak. No one will be able to threaten you. Just cultivate in peace on Heaven's Link Peak for the next few days, the sagely old man said to Houston. He spoke very kindly. Houston clasped his hands at the old man and said, "Thank you for saving me, Senior. May I ask who you are and why you saved me?" Houston was very puzzled. The white-clothed young man's strength was already terrifying enough, but the white-clothed young man still had to bow to the old man. He really didn't dare imagine just how noble this mortal old man was. On the cloud plane, people refer to the old man as the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. As for saving you, there's no need for you to thank the old man. The old man did not save you, but all the people in the world, said the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. All the people in the world? Senior, what do you mean by that? Houston was completely baffled by what he heard and was somewhat at a loss. The Lord of Heaven's Link Peak glanced at Amagami deeply and sighed gently. There's no need for you to ask about this. You will understand in the future. Afterwards, the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak got a child to take Houston away. Lord, I'm very confused. This person is only an overgod. He's pitifully weak. How can he be connected to all the people in the world? The white-robed young man who had saved Houston asked politely after he had left. He was also filled with doubt. The Lord of Heaven's Link Peak sighed gently. He looked at the vast sky, and his gaze deepened. The demonic god artifact in his possession is extremely important. Nothing can happen to the demonic god artifact at all, or when that person comes, there will definitely be a storm of blood on the cloud plane. The white-robed young man was shocked when he heard that. He asked, who is that person? Is he really that powerful? Moreover, not only is there Peak Lord, but there's also the Tion Empire and many other Peak organizations on our cloud plane. Do we still have to fear that person? The Lord of Heaven's Link Peak shook his head. He became very stern when that person was mentioned. That person is indeed very powerful. There's no one on the cloud plane that's his opponent yet. It's best if we don't provoke him. The young man paled in shock. Who is the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak? Even he feared that person to such an extent. Just who was that person? Chapter 1995. In the Tianyuan family of the Dong, and province of the divine kingdom of Pingtian, the two holy emperors of the Shi dynasty, Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming, who had come from the northern region, were currently negotiating with the two holy emperors of the Blood Sun Empire. They communicated secretly, so aside from the four of them, no one else, including Emperor Shi and Shi Ziyun, knew about the details of the negotiation. However, Emperor Shi did not care about the negotiation at all. To him, there was no need for him to know about the process. All he needed to know was the outcome. If he was dissatisfied with the outcome of the negotiation, even if there were two holy emperors of the Shi dynasty present, even if his father was present, it would not be enough to stop him from doing whatever he wanted. In the past, when Shi Ziyun was still the crown prince, he was gentle, scholarly, and knowledgeable. He was both brave and resourceful. He was extremely outstanding in every aspect, so he was greatly favored by his father. However, Shi Ziyun just happened to be aloof from worldly affairs. He had no interest in the throne at all, nor did he have any interest in fighting for it. As a result, Shi Ziyun did not develop his strength like the other princes of the Shi dynasty. He had always been alone, remaining an extremely low-key prince. However, what happened afterwards made Shi Ziyun lose his daughter. It was also from that moment onwards that Shi Ziyun's personality changed drastically. He was no longer aloof from worldly affairs. For his daughter, he had basically lost his mind. He madly took revenge on the people who had hunted him down and caused him to lose his daughter. This was more than enough to demonstrate just how important his daughter was to him. In the eyes of other emperors, the interests of the empire were above everything else. For the sake of the empire, they were willing to lose their own children. Unfortunately, Ziyun was different. He was an emperor who was willing to sacrifice the empire for his daughter. Now that he had finally found his long-lost daughter, it was certain that Emperor Shi was willing to give up everything for his daughter. As the Shi dynasty negotiated with the Holy Emperor of the Blood Sun Empire, Emperor Shi and the Empress surrounded Shi Yu and asked about her well-being. At that moment, They did not seem like an emperor and empress at all. However, under the care of the Shi Emperor and the Empress, Shiyu said very little. She stared at the Shi Emperor and the Empress with extremely mixed feelings. Even she struggled to describe her feelings. All of this had happened so suddenly. Just when the Tianyuan family was about to be destroyed, her parents, whom she had never seen before, had actually appeared. They crushed the 9th prince in an extremely forceful manner and stood against the holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire. She felt like she was dreaming. Everything that had happened. It seemed that in the depths of her heart, she had not completely accepted the dramatic change in front of her eyes. As for the people in the surroundings, it went without saying. They had all been petrified. I never thought that Shiyu of the Tianyuan family would actually be the daughter of the emperor of the Shi dynasty. Saying too, you should rejoice that you didn't become enemies with the Tianyuan family. Otherwise, the consequences would have been. The divine king sighed as he communicated with the ancestor of the Earth Spirit sect secretly. The ancestor of the Earth Spirit sect, saying too, felt lingering fear. Only he understood why he had spared the Tianyuan family, and even handed over a divine king of his sect to resolve his grievances with the Tianyuan family. It was not because of Jinshin's talent. Instead, it was because of the threat from the woman in white. It was because of the woman's strength that Sang Tu felt extremely fearful, or even fearful, which was why he had taken a step back and stopped targeting the Tianyuan family. If it were not for the woman in white, Sang Tu would never have let the matter rest. After all, this was related to the dignity and dignity of the Earth Spirit sect. As a peak organization in the Heavenly Moon Empire, the Earth Spirit sect naturally had to maintain their dignity. Only now did Sang Tu truly understand just how wise of a decision it was to not become enemies with the Tianyuan family after personally witnessing everything that had happened to the Tianyuan family. However, Sang Tu seemed to think of something very soon. His face immediately changed, and his forehead immediately became covered with cold sweat. A great sense of unease filled his heart, as well as endless regret. He suddenly remembered that the 9th prince was able to find the Tianyuan family because of the information on the jade slip he had given out. If Emperor Shi found out about this, Sang Tu became uneasy as soon as he thought up to there. Fear filled his heart. The fact that the princess of the Shi Empire had almost died was definitely related to him. I didn't leave behind my presence or name on the jade slip. Moreover, the contents are no longer a secret in the divine kingdom of Pingtian. As long as I refuse to admit it, even the 9th prince won't be able to prove that I was the one who leaked the information. Sang Tu secretly made up his mind. At this moment, the negotiations between the two sides had come to an end. The two great holy emperor of the Shi dynasty arrived before Emperor Shi. Emperor Shi's father, Shi Haoshuan, said, "Ziyun, the Blood Sun Empire will compensate you with a droplet of spiritual essence of outer space and many heavenly resources. At the same time, you can take the 9th prince's arm. This matter will end here." The other great holy emperor of the Shi dynasty, Shi Haoming, also tried to persuade him, "Ziyun, your father and I both know that you're furious, but this matter hasn't become an irreversible mistake. Moreover, the Blood Sun Empire is also an eternal empire. Their strength is similar to our Shi empires, so you have to consider their dignity. Don't make things worse. Otherwise, it won't benefit our Shi empire or the Blood Sun Empire at all." Emperor Shi's face immediately sank when he heard that. A supreme sense of dignity radiated from him, and he said coldly, "No, no matter who it is, I will make them pay with their blood for harming my daughter. If they want to protect the 9th prince who harmed my daughter, I will use the imperial decree and declare war on the Blood Sun Empire." "Nonsense." Shi Haoshuan's face sank. He tried his best to stop him. Even Shi Haoming joined in. In their eyes, the interests of the empire were above everything else. They were people who could give up on their children for the sake of the empire. So how could they allow Emperor Shi to do something so crazy? Shi Ziyun's face was cold. He said emotionlessly, "If that's the case, I'll give up my position as emperor. From today onwards, I have nothing to do with the Shi dynasty at all. I won't use the power of the Shi dynasty." The two of us can still avenge our daughter." Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming's faces both changed when they heard that. Even the two great holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire revealed rather ugly expressions. They could hear the determination and decisiveness in Emperor Shi's words. It was a determination that he would not give up until he reached his goal. "Emperor Shi, how about this? Let's set a date of 10,000 years. With your princess talent and the nurturing of your Shi Empire, she'll definitely reach the level of a divine king in 10,000 years. When that time comes, we'll let the 9th prince of our Blood Sun Empire engage in a battle with your princess. We'll settle this grievance in the arena. What do you think, Emperor Shi?" one of the great holy emperors of the Blood Sun Empire said. Chapter 1996. The Shi Emperor's eyes turned cold, and he said coldly, "You sure have your wishful thinking. Let's not talk about how great the difference in cultivation between my Yu and your 9th prince is, but it was your 9th prince who injured my Yu first. Yet now, you want to propose a duel between my Yu and the 9th prince of your Blood Sun Empire. Don't tell me that in your eyes, the life of my daughter is nowhere near as precious as the 9th prince of your Blood Sun Empire?" Emperor Shi's face was extremely sunken. He was furious. With that, he took a step forward, and his powerful presence as a chaotic prime flooded the surroundings, enveloping the people from the Blood Sun Empire in an extremely domineering manner. He called out, "Don't tell me, Emperor, she won't agree to your laughable duel. Moreover, if you don't hand over the 9th prince today, Emperor, she will make your Blood Sun Empire pay an unbearable price." The two great holy emperors of the Blood Sun Empire fell silent. They radiated presences that were no weaker than Emperor Shi's, protecting the people from the Blood Sun Empire. However, from their furrowed brows, it was clear that they were struggling inside. They were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Emperor Shi had only become a chaotic prime recently, so the two great elders of the Blood Sun Empire were no weaker than Emperor Shi in terms of cultivation. However, they did not dare to become enemies with Emperor Shi. However, they would not hand over the 9th prince either. They understood Emperor Shi's personality very well. Once they handed over the 9th prince would be dead for sure. They did not care about the lives of any prince of the Blood Sun Empire. But if the 9th prince of the Blood Sun Empire was executed by the Shi dynasty, the Blood Sun Empire could not afford to lose face. However, if they personally executed the 9th prince because of this matter, it would be a loss of dignity for the Blood Sun Empire as well. After all, Emperor Shi's daughter was completely fine now. She had only suffered some injuries. If they had to pay with the life of a prince of their Blood Sun Empire, wouldn't that mean that their Blood Sun Empire was inferior to the Shi dynasty? Therefore, for Emperor Shi, this matter was just to avenge his daughter. However, to the Blood Sun Empire, it was an important matter that concerned their dignity and status. At that moment, Shi suddenly said, "All right, I accept your suggestion. 10,000 years later, let me have a fair battle with the 9th prince on the stage. I want to kill him with my own hands." Shiyu's voice contained undisguised killing intent. That was killing intent for the 9th prince. Don't be rash. Your father will stand up for you." Celestial Empress pulled Shiyu's arm and glared at her. Emperor Shi also looked at Shiyu. He did not blame her at all. Instead, his eyes were filled with gentleness. He said, "There's no need to wait 10,000 years. Since the 9th prince has injured you, he won't be able to leave here today. Don't agree to the battle on the stage either." Shiyu shook her head. She stared at the 9th prince who had been beaten to a pulp by Celestial Empress behind the Blood Emperor. She gritted her teeth and said, "I want to take revenge with my own hands. 10,000 years later, I want to kill him with my own strength on the stage." Emperor Shi opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but when he saw Shiyu's determined gaze, he could only sigh helplessly. He could see Shiyu's determination from her gaze. If he continued to persuade her, not only would he fail to change Shiyu's mind, but he might even make her dislike him. That was naturally not something Emperor Shi wanted to see. Just as the two great holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire were at a loss as to what to do, their eyes immediately lit up when they suddenly heard Shiyu agree to the battle on the stage. One of them immediately said, Since the princess of your empire has agreed, it's settled then. Emperor Shi, what do you think? Emperor Shi was helpless. He did not fear the Blood Sun Empire, nor was he afraid of starting a war with them. However, he needed to consider his daughter's feelings. Since his daughter had already made up her mind, what could he say? For you, Ur's sake, Emperor Shi will let your ninth prince live for 10,000 more years for now. However, while he can avoid the death penalty, he cannot escape punishment. Emperor Shi's gaze sharpened towards the end. He pointed at the ninth prince from afar, and a terrifying pulse of energy shot out from his finger, directly shooting towards the ninth prince. Arg! The ninth prince let out a painful scream as he fell from the sky. Blood flowed out from between his eyebrows. His soul had already been heavily injured by Emperor Shi, and the power of primordial realm laws had taken over his soul. Not only was it difficult for his soul to recover, but it would also be difficult for him to reach the primordial realm again. Let's go. The two great holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire were emotionless as they turned around to leave. Leave behind the spiritual essence of starry skies. Emperor Shi said, the spiritual essence of starry skies was good stuff. It would be extremely helpful to Shiyu. Even with his current strength, it was extremely difficult for him to obtain a single droplet of it. The great holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire paused. He tossed out the jade bottle with the spiritual essence of starry skies before leaving. The great emperor of the Blood Sun Empire grabbed the ninth prince with a sunken face. He said nothing, leaving with the infinite primes of the empire. In the blink of an eye, everyone from the Blood Sun Empire had left. After they left, Shi Haoming and Shi Haoshuan did not stick around either. They left very soon. In the blink of an eye, the great holy emperor of the Blood Sun Empire and the Shi dynasty had all left. Only Emperor Shi's group remained. Although the disturbance had settled down, the arrival of the supreme experts from both sides had left the Tianyuan family shocked. Even now, many of them had yet to return to their senses. You've suffered in the past few years. Come home with Mother. Mother will use the rest of her life to make it up to you. The Empress slowly gripped Shiyu's hands. Her face was filled with love. Emperor, she stowed away the jade bottle with the spiritual essence of starry skies. He turned around and looked at his daughter affectionately. Although he said nothing, he felt warmth and happiness that he had never felt before. 2,000 years. 2,000 years. After searching for 2,000 years, he had finally reunited with his daughter today. This is my home. Shiyu pulled back her hand from the Empress's grasp. Shiyu pulled her hand back from the Empress' hand. She looked at the ruined Tianyuan clan and spoke very softly. The Empress sorrowfully cried out. Shiyu's coldness had shattered her heart. Tears flickered in her eyes, almost rolling out again. No matter what, I still have to thank you. Thank you for saving my Tianyuan family. Shiyu slowly took a few steps back and bowed deeply towards the Empress and Emperor Shi. The Empress finally could not help but sob again when she saw Shiyu like that. Emperor Shi sighed inside as well. He knew that his daughter was still unwilling to forgive him. However, since he had already found his daughter, he believed that he could use time to make her change. He believed that he could use time to make her accept him. The light in the Divine King's eyes flickered as he hesitated. After a while of hesitation, he made up his mind and stood out from the crowd. He clasped his hands and said, I am the Divine King of the Divine Kingdom of Pingtian. Greetings to your Majesty, Emperor Shi and the Empress. After bowing to Emperor Shi and the Empress, the Divine King looked at Shiyu. He became stern and said, Your Highness, Jianshan is currently being hunted down by the vice leader of the heavenly demon religion, Huayan. He is in danger. His life could be in danger at any time. Shiyu's face immediately changed drastically when she heard that Jianshan was being hunted down. At that moment, she completely forgot about her parents and the Shi dynasty. All she could think about was what the Divine King had said. Your Highness, what did you say? The Patriarch is being hunted down by the vice leader of the heavenly demon religion? Shiyu arrived before the Divine King with a flash and asked in disbelief. The Divine King nodded. Earlier, Huayan brought 3 late Divine King protectors to deal with Jianshan. Although I've kept Huayan busy, the three late Divine King Protectors have gone to hunt down Jianshan. Jianshan is a supreme overgod, but it's impossible for him to be the opponent of three late Divine King Protectors. He won't be able to last very long against the pursuit of three late Divine King Protectors. And now that Huayan is no longer being kept busy by me, he's gone in the direction Jianshan has fled in. With his speed, he's probably caught up to Jianshan already. Jianshan has no chance of escaping. If nothing unexpected happens, he's dead for sure. Chapter 1997. The expressions of Siyu, Ruijin, Honglian, Blackfish, and the others from the Tianyuan continent all changed. It was obvious what the outcome would be if an overgod was hunted down by a primordial realm expert. Emperor Shi's eyes lit up when he heard that. He said, "Do you have Jianshan's portrait and items with his presence?" "Yes. There should be traces of the Patriarch's presence in his secret room," said Mo Ling before taking Emperor Shi directly into Jianshan's room. Emperor Shi was a chaotic prime, so he managed to capture the lingering presence in Jianshan's room without any effort. Afterwards, he immediately expanded the senses of his soul, blanketing the surroundings. She stood to one side as she stared at Emperor Shi nervously, even though she was still unable to accept the sudden appearance of her parents. Only they could save Jianshan right now. Very soon, Emperor Shi withdrew the senses of his soul. He looked at Shiyu's nervous gaze and said, "I discovered Huayan outside the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, but he's already injured. He was injured by the people of the Blood Sun Empire. There are traces of Jianshan's presence in the imperial capital, but I can't find him. However, a spatial battleship took off recently. Jianshan's presence vanished from where the spatial battleship was parked. If I've guessed correctly, he should have boarded the spatial battleship and left the cloud plane." Shiyu and the people of the Tianyuan family immediately let out a sigh of relief when they heard that Jianshan was fine. Emperor Shi, on the other hand, felt rather regretful. Originally, he wanted to use saving Jianshan to deepen their relationship and reduce his daughter's resistance towards him, but he failed to find Jianshan in the end. Jia Yun greets the great emperor, empress, and princess. Not long after, a middle-aged man dressed in a white robe arrived at the Tianyuan family. He respectfully saluted Emperor Shi and the other two. Jia Yun was the Divine King of Light who had hurried over from the Shi dynasty as quickly as he could through a regional teleportation formation after receiving Emperor Shi's decree. As soon as he joined the Tianyuan family, he learned about Shiyu's identity from a primordial realm expert who accompanied Emperor Shi. After learning that Jia Yun was the Divine King of Light, Shiyu immediately brought Jia Yun to where Mo Yin had died eagerly. She asked urgently, "Senior, do you really have the power to save Sister Mo Yin?" Jia Yun closed his eyes and sensed. He smiled confidently and clasped his fist at Shiyu. He said, "Although her body has been destroyed, her soul has not dispersed. She's still alive, so don't worry, Your Highness. Saving this person won't be difficult." "Then please save Sister Mo Yin, Senior Jia Yun." She was overjoyed as she became excited. "Yes, Your Highness." Jia Yun clasped his hands politely. She was Emperor Shi's only daughter, so her status was naturally different from before. Even though Jia Yun was the Divine King of Light and possessed a status far greater than the other Divine Kings in the Blood Sun Empire, he still had to act politely before Emperor Shi's only daughter. However, just when Jia Yun was about to save Mo Yin, he suddenly paused, but he recovered very quickly. He said to Shiyu, "Your Highness, if you want to save this person, you must do it in the Shi dynasty where I cultivate in seclusion. I've engraved formations there, and the Radiant Saint Force is extremely dense. Only in an environment like that can you guarantee a 100% success rate. Moreover, there's a very high chance that she'll lose her memories when the soul fragment is condensed. She won't be able to remember her past. Therefore, in order to ensure that Your Highness's younger sister retains her complete memories after she is resurrected, Your Highness will have to constantly call out her name by her side. Furthermore, Your Highness's aura will be used as a guide so that the reformed soul will not lose its memories." Jia Yun's expression was rather unnatural. This was the first time he had told such a long lie ever since he started cultivating. However, he was extremely helpless. As emperor, she had given him an absolute order. He had to trick the princess into the Shi dynasty no matter what he did. As a result, he could only make up a lie like this. In reality, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble with his abilities as a radiant god king if he wanted to revive Mo Yin, who only had her soul shattered and had not been completely destroyed. "All right, I'll go with you immediately." Shiyu agreed without any hesitation. She did not understand just how powerful the Divine King was, so she naturally did not know that Jia Yun did not need to go to the Shi dynasty to save Mo Yin with his cultivation. However, Jia Yun was Mo Yin's only hope. As long as Mo Yin could be saved, let alone the Shi dynasty, she would not hesitate even if she had to climb a mountain of blades or plunge into a sea of flames. "There's no time to lose. Let's return right now. Don't worry about the Tianyuan family. I'll get Guesty to stay here temporarily." Emperor Shi beamed and gave Jia Yun a look of praise. He immediately left the Tianyuan family with Shi Yu heading to the Shi dynasty. However, one of the two old men remained with the Tianyuan family. After Emperor Shi's departure, the primordial realm experts of the Heavenly Moon Empire who had arrived a long time ago finally found an opportunity to speak. Whether it was the primordial realm experts of the imperial family, or the ancestors of the Taoist sect of Calm Clouds, or the Earth Spirit sect, they all put down their pride as primordial realm experts and expressed their goodwill to the Tianyuan family. They were all extremely polite, leaving behind various resources before leaving. The vice leader of the heavenly demon religion, Huayan, and the three divine king flew steadily in the sky outside the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Huayan's face was extremely sunken as terrifying killing intent would flicker in his eyes from time to time. As for the three protectors who were following behind him, they remained silent as they trembled with fear as they followed behind. The three of them knew that they had failed to stop Jianshin, allowing him to flee to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. In the end, he had even left the cloud plane on a spaceship, which made Huayan extremely furious. The presence of a chaotic prime has appeared in the divine kingdom of Pingtian. I'll go to the divine kingdom of Pingtian and have a look at what's going on before wiping out the Tianyuan family, thought Huayan before directly flying towards the divine kingdom of Pingtian with the three divine king behind him. Jianshin stood before the window of a huge cabin at the bottom of the spaceship. He stared out in a daze as he stared at the huge piece of land that rapidly shrank in his eyes. The spaceship moved faster and faster. As it grew further and further away, the vast piece of land was finally revealed. This was the first time Jianshin had seen the entire cloud plane. The cloud plane was not a sphere. Instead, it was a huge piece of land that floated in outer space. The land was split into 5 parts by the sea, forming the 5 regions. Jianshin looked at the southern region as if he wanted to find the Tianyuan family's location. Unfortunately, the Tianyuan family was just far too small compared to the entire southern region. Let alone the Tianyuan family, he could not even find the entire divine kingdom of Pingtian. Chapter 1998. As this voice rang out, some of the people who were still chatting in the cabin returned to their seats. They sat on the stone platforms in the cabin. Soon after, waves of powerful origin energy ripples were transmitted over. At this moment, everyone in the cabin endlessly channeled their origin energy into the stone platform. As they channeled their origin energy, Jianshan could clearly sense the speed of the spaceship suddenly increase. It became faster and faster. In the end, when he looked outside, he discovered that the stars outside had all turned into streaks of light and rapidly receded. The stars did not move. Instead, the spaceship moved just too quickly. The speed of the spaceship has probably surpassed that of infinite primes, Jianshin muttered to himself. Jianshan was secretly surprised when he saw this. His gaze then landed on the people who sat on the stone pedestals and constantly channeled origin energy into them. He returned to his seat with some doubt. Beside Jianshan, Master Chanlong had already channeled origin energy into the stone platforms. When he saw Jianshan and Kaya's confused gazes, he explained, "The tickets for the spaceship are extremely tight, and they're not cheap either. As a result, I can only buy 3 low-class tickets. All the people who take the low-class tickets need to channel their origin energy into the Jade platforms every other day. The Jade platforms are connected by powerful formations. All the origin energy that is channeled into the Jade platforms will be channeled into the power formations of the spaceship, providing a portion of the spaceship's power." Master Chanlong looked at Jianshan and Kaya, who still had not done anything, and said rather helplessly, "Although the price for the low-class tickets is low, you need to provide a portion of the power for the spaceship. This is tied to the ticket. If you don't do that, you'll be stripped of your right to take the spaceship and thrown out." "Then can we upgrade our low-class tickets to a higher-class ticket?" Jianshan asked. He did not have enough divine crystals to call for a teleportation formation across planes, but he was confident that he could afford it. After all, he had obtained a large number of divine crystals from Yaxilian. As the commander of the 7th Army of the Heavenly Demon Religion, Yaxilian was far wealthier than regular divine kings. Even though he had purchased a large number of things in the Xiandao dynasty, he had only used up less than half of the divine crystals in Yaxilian's space ring. "The ticket is already full. We can't upgrade it even if we want to. We can only upgrade if someone in the middle class or high class cabins leaves or dies," said Chanlong. Jianshan nodded slightly and sat down on the stone pedestal. He did not pour his energy into the stone pedestal like everyone else. Instead, he took out a large number of thumb-sized high-grade divine crystals from his space ring. As soon as the divine crystals came in contact with the stone pedestal, the pure origin energy within them was rapidly absorbed by the stone pedestal. Jianshan cultivated chaotic force. It was far more precious than the origin energy cultivated by other cultivators, so he naturally could not pour his chaotic force into the stone pedestal. As a result, he would rather use divine crystals as a replacement than lose any of his chaotic force. Jianshan's actions immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the cabin. At that moment, everyone was stunned. At that moment, everyone in the cabin stared at Jianshan. There were people like Jianshan who used divine crystals instead of themselves to channel origin energy into the stone platform, but they were extremely rare. However, the divine crystals they used were all low-quality divine crystals. They had never even heard of someone like Jianshan who directly used high-grade divine crystals. For a moment, many people in the surroundings looked at him enviously. There was some jealousy as well. The divine crystals Jianshan had taken out were quite a large sum to many people present. Idiot, he's actually using high-grade divine crystals to replace origin energy. I like to see how long he can last. I'm certain he can't last 3 days. If he burns high-grade divine crystals for too long, even Divine King experts won't be able to endure it. There are also a few people who discuss softly. Naturally, Jianshan heard their discussions as well. Jianshan said nothing about this. However, he felt very helpless inside. This was because all he had in his space ring right now was high-grade divine crystals and supreme-grade divine crystals. Moreover, he did not have a lot of thumb-sized divine crystals left. Basically, they were all 1 square meter in size. In the blink of an eye, the spatial battleship had already flown through the vast outer space for half a month. During this half a month, Jianshan continued to use high-grade divine crystals to replace his actions of channeling energy into the jade pedestal. He had spent several tens of thousands of high-grade divine crystals. Some people in the cabin who believed that Jianshan would not be able to last for long gradually changed their minds when they saw how Jianshan had spent several tens of thousands of high-grade divine crystals. Then, their gazes towards Jianshan became filled with desire and greed. Clearly, someone who could treat several tens of thousands of high-grade divine crystals as nothing clearly had a lot of divine crystals on him. I'll use up over 2,000 high-grade divine crystals in a day, and I'll need to channel energy into the jade pedestal for half a month every month. That's close to 500,000 high-grade divine crystals in a year and 1 million in 2 years. That's a block of high-grade divine crystals, Jianshan calculated the consumption as well. A block of high-grade divine crystals every 2 years was nothing to him right now. This was because he had several dozen blocks of supreme-grade divine crystals in his space ring, let alone high-grade divine crystals. A block of supreme-grade divine crystals could be exchanged for 100 blocks of high-grade divine crystals. At this moment, 7 people in black robes arrived before Jianshan. They vaguely surrounded Jianshan as he sat on the jade pedestal. One of the middle-aged men smiled and said, "May I ask for your name? Where do you come from, and which sect do you come from?" Jianshan had sensed their intentions long ago. From their basically identical robes, he could tell that they belonged to the same organization. Moreover, aside from the 7 people before him, there were over 30 other people in the cabin who wore the same robes as them. However, the 7 people before him were the most powerful here. They were all overgods, while the others who wore the same clothes as them were not even overgods. "I'm just an idle person. I don't belong to any sect. There's no need for me to mention my name. It's not worth your concern," Jianshan said calmly as he remained seated on the jade pedestal. He had already left the cloud plane now, so he was indeed an idle person. Master Chanlong and Kea opened their eyes at this moment as well. They stared at the 7 people coldly. The 7 men naturally sensed that Jianshan was with Chanlong and Kea, but they did not care at all. The eyes of the middle-aged man who had spoken before lit up when he heard that Jianshan was just an independent cultivator. He said, "We're from the Swords Wolf Adventurers. The captain and 2 elders are in the highest class cabin of the spaceship right now. They're all divine king experts. Why don't you join our Swords Wolf Adventurers? Although we're not some peak organization, we do have 3 divine king experts. What do you think?" As they spoke, pressure radiated from the 7 of them, slowly approaching Jianshan. Chapter 1999. Once you join our Swords Wolf Adventurers, I have 100 ways to kill you. At that time, no matter how many divine crystals you have on you, they'll all be mine, the middle-aged man sneered. Naturally, he had come for Jianshan's divine crystals. When he saw how Jianshan treated the high-grade divine crystals like nothing, he knew that Jianshan was an extremely wealthy person. He had probably obtained some fortuitous encounters from somewhere. As for Chanlong and Kea, who came with Jianshan, although they were overgods and were no weaker than any of them, the middle-aged man did not take them seriously at all. This was because they were from the Swords Wolf Adventurers. Even if they did not mention the fact that the Swords Wolf Adventurers possessed 3 divine king, just the people who had stepped forward right now were not to be trifled with. They all knew how to use combination attacks. Once they worked together, they could basically be said to be invincible below the divine king. Even if they came across enemies several times more powerful than them, they would not be defeated. Not interested, Jianshan spoke extremely indifferently. Even though he knew that the Swords Wolf Adventurers possessed 3 divine king, he did not take them seriously at all. As long as he did not come across late divine king experts, they would not pose much of a threat to him. However, late divine king experts were not that easy to come across. Moreover, he had already learned from Chanlong that fighting was forbidden on the spatial battleship. As a result, so what if the Swords Wolf Adventurers possessed a late divine king expert? It was only because of the rules on the spatial battleship that they could not fight as they pleased. The middle-aged man seemed to have expected Jianshan to turn him down. His expression did not change as he said, "Our Swords Wolf Adventurers is a rather powerful adventurers group after all. Sir, are you looking down on us by turning down our invitation? Nothing good will come to anyone who looks down on our Swords Wolf Adventurers. Brother, you better consider it carefully." A gloomy young man who seemed to be in his 30s behind Jianshan growled. He radiated with faint killing intent. "Aren't you being a little too overbearing? If I don't join your Swords Wolf Adventurers, I'll be looking down on you. Does your Swords Wolf Adventurers have to join just because you want them to?" Kaya stood up and said furiously, "Haha, that's right. Is our Swords Wolf Adventurers that unreasonable?" The gloomy young man sneered. He stared at Kaya and mocked. "But you don't have to worry, miss. Our Swords Wolf Adventurers isn't a group that just anyone can join. Your cultivation is barely passable, but as for your looks, The young man shook his head and sighed when he reached there. Sigh. After spending some time in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire in the southern region of the Cloud Plain, I've gotten used to seeing alluring beauties, so my standards have improved all of a sudden. Now that I've seen your looks, I really can't let you join our Swords Wolf adventurers because the girls we've played with in the brothels of the imperial capital are thousands of times prettier than you. If we take you out in the future, our Swords Wolf adventurers will probably lose all face because of you. Ha! That's right. Our Swords Wolf adventurer team is a somewhat famous adventurer team. We can't just accept ugly women. Otherwise, we won't have the face to show our faces in the future, Swords Wolf said, chuckling. Miss, stop glaring at us. No matter how much you glare at us, you won't be able to get us to invite you to join our Swords Wolf adventurers because your face just makes things very difficult for us. The people from the Swords Wolf adventurers laughed aloud. The topic gradually shifted to Kea, mocking and humiliating her recklessly. Kea's face paled from anger. Although she was an overgod, she was still a girl after all. There were no girls who did not care about their looks. She became extremely furious when the people from the Swords Wolf adventurers said such horrible things about her. Kea was indeed not alluring, let alone Fairy Haoyue, Shangwan Mu and so on. Even Princesses Xing and Lan from the Xiandao dynasty were much more beautiful than Kea. However, she was still a natural beauty. She was definitely not as bad as the people from the Swords Wolf adventurers had made her out to be. Killing intent filled Jinshin's heart when he saw Kea being humiliated by the people from the Swords Wolf adventurers. He looked at Chanlong emotionlessly and said, Master Chanlong, is there any way to kill them? Chanlong's face was ugly as well. He had already treated Kea as his best friend due to the vague sense of familiarity. Now that his best friend had been publicly humiliated, killing intent filled his heart as well. There's an arena of life and death on the spatial battleship. There are no restrictions on entering the arena. Once you enter, you can kill as you please without breaking the rules of the spatial battleship, said Chanlong. He seemed to know what Jinshin was going to do next. So he stood up from the jade platform. Jinshin stared at the people from the Swords Wolf adventurers coldly and said emotionlessly, Haven't you been trying so hard to anger us for my space ring? Now, I'll give you a chance to take all my wealth. If you can kill me in the arena of life and death, then... Jinshin directly took out a block of supreme grade divine crystal from his space ring and tossed it on the ground. He said, Then all the wealth in my space ring will be yours. This block of supreme grade divine crystal is only a portion of it. I just don't know if you have the courage to take it all. The block of supreme grade divine crystal was placed beside Jinshin. It was translucent and gave off a dense light. Pure and surging origin energy pulsed from it, causing the eyes of everyone in the cabin to turn red. They all stared at the block of supreme grade divine crystal. This was an entire block of supreme grade divine crystal. It was a meter in length, width, and height, let alone supreme grade. Many people in the cabin had not even seen high-grade divine crystal before. The people from the Swords Wolf adventurers also stared at the block of supreme grade divine crystal. Greed filled their eyes. They knew that Kea and Jinshin were on the same side, which was why they had humiliated Kea in an attempt to infuriate Jinshin and force him into the arena of life and death. However, they never thought they would achieve their objective so easily. We accept your challenge. Let's go to the arena of life and death. The people from the Swords Wolf adventurers agreed without any hesitation. Even though some of them had already sensed that something was off, they forgot about it very soon under the temptation of supreme grade divine crystals. Although they could not tell Jinshin's cultivation, they could tell from his presence that Jinshin was not an expert like the Divine King. As long as they did not come across the Divine King, they had nothing to fear. Moreover, even if they did come across the Divine King, so what? There were no rules in the arena of life and death. If the 7 of them worked together and used various techniques, they would be able to keep the Divine King busy for a while. That was enough time for their captain to arrive. Jinshin, Kea, and Chanlong had already made their way towards the arena of life and death with the 7 overgods of the Swords Wolf adventurers. Behind them were several dozen members of the Swords Wolf adventurers who were below overgod. After they left, many of the remaining people in the cabin hesitated slightly before following them. They wanted to see what was going on. At the same time, in a luxuriously decorated room within a high-class cabin of the spatial battleship, a burly man in red robes with a vicious scar on his face sat on a jade bed. He was the captain of the Swords Wolf adventurers, nicknamed the Wolf King. Suddenly, the Wolf King's face changed, and he slowly opened his eyes. He took out a jade talisman from a space ring and scanned it with the senses of his soul. Ching Fan and the others have caught a big fish in the lower-class cabin. They actually have a block of supreme grade divine crystal on them, and they've already entered the arena of life and death. Yep, it really is a big fish. Ching Fan and the others have done well. I'll reward them later. The Wolf King beamed. Even to a divine king like him, a block of supreme grade divine crystal was a fortune that could not be ignored. Chapter 2000. The arena of life and death was located in the central region of the spatial battleship. This region was the busiest part of the spatial battleship. It was a place where commerce, food, and entertainment were all present. It seemed like a miniature, bustling town. Here, not only could one trade freely and buy what one needed, including various cultivation methods, combat skills, treasures, and so on, but there were also various delicacies made from the meat of the giant star beasts, which attracted a large number of diners every day. Jianshun, Gu Changle, and the people of the Swords Wolf adventurers passed through the bustling commercial region and directly arrived before the arena of life and death. The arena of life and death was a huge, circular ring that was 1,000 meters across. A barrier enveloped the entire ring. The barrier was so powerful that even god kings would struggle to shake it, let alone overgods. As soon as they arrived, the gloomy young man who had humiliated Kea before directly leapt onto the arena of life and death. The 6 other overgods of the Swords Wolf adventurers all surrounded Jianshin, Kea, and Chanlong, cutting off Jianshin's path of retreat and preventing them from fleeing. I've already entered the arena of life and death. Kid, weren't you quite arrogant earlier? You boasted that you wanted to kill us. Now that the chance to kill me is right before you, why don't you get up here? The gloomy young man stood in the ring and stared at Jianshin provocatively. The 3 of you have already come here. Could it be that you want to shrink back at the last minute? Ha! Don't tell me you've been frightened out of your wits by our Swords Wolf adventurers. Look at them. You can tell with a single glance that they're cowards. The 6 people from the Swords Wolf adventurers who surrounded Jianshin all provoked him. They were nervous as if they were afraid that Jianshin would actually run away. They no longer paid any attention to Kea and Chanlong. Their main target was Jianshin. A cold light flickered through Jianshin's eyes as he listened to the various mocking words. A sliver of killing intent flashed through his eyes, and he leapt up gently. He passed through the barrier around the arena of life and death without any obstructions, arriving in the arena of life and death. The arena of life and death on the spatial battleship did not restrict the challengers at all. Regardless of whether there were people fighting in the arena of life and death or not, the people outside could enter the arena at any time. Once the battle of life and death began, it would not end until one side was dead. Only the victor could leave the arena alive. Defeat was equivalent to death. The eyes of the Swords Wolf adventurers lit up when they saw Jianshin actually enter the arena of life and death. They all became excited. As long as one entered the arena of life and death, it meant that the battle of life and death had already begun. Unless one obtained victory, one would not be able to leave the arena. Haha, you really are bold. The people from the Swords Wolf adventurers laughed aloud. Afterwards, the 6 overgods below the arena all leapt into the arena at that moment. They had never considered fighting Jianshin one-on-one. They had already planned on forcing Jianshin into the arena of life and death so that they could all attack together and kill Jianshin. Once Jianshin died in the arena of life and death, all of Jianshin's wealth would become theirs. Jinshin, leave that person to me. I want to teach him a lesson personally. Keia's voice rang out. She and Master Chanlong leapt into the arena of life and death at the same time. She glared at the young man who had humiliated her before as killing intent surged. At this very moment, there were already people gathering around the life and death arena. They were all pointing at the few people on the arena as they discussed in low voices. Many people did not have high hopes for Jinshin's group, since it was 3 against 7. The Swords Wolf adventurers were rather renowned here. Many people knew that they possessed a combination technique that could allow them to defeat stronger opponents. Moreover, the Swords Wolf adventurers' strength did not just stop there. They had the support of the 3 Divine King experts. Although an organization like that was nowhere close to the peak, it was quite powerful on the spatial battleship. Fusion of form and soul. It was also at this moment that the people of the Swords Wolf adventurers began to move. With a bellow, the 7 overgods of the Swords Wolf adventurers stood in a certain pattern as quickly as they could, preparing to launch a combined attack. Once the combination technique is complete, the 3 of them will definitely die. Even if we're unlucky and come across a Supreme Overgod on the Overgod's plaque, we'll be able to match them. All we need to do is keep them busy until the captain arrives. Then, even Supreme Overgods will be dead. That block of Supreme Grade Divine Crystals belongs to our Swords Wolf adventurers. And for what the kid said, he seems to have more than a single block of Supreme Grade Divine Crystals. Ha ha! We've struck it rich this time. The 7 overgods of the Swords Wolf adventurers were all overjoyed. It was as if all of Jinshin's wealth was already theirs. Just as the people of the Swords Wolf adventurers were fantasizing about how many supreme grade divine crystals they could obtain, a terrifying presence of destruction suddenly appeared. Keia extended her right hand and grabbed at the space there. A sword completely condensed from the laws of destruction, condensed in a single instance. It radiated with a terrifying presence before turning into a black streak of light, shooting towards the young man who had insulted her with lightning speed. Although Keia had not grasped the power of laws for very long, her usage of the laws had already reached perfection. It had even surpassed Jinshin's usage of the laws of the sword. No one could rival her. As a result, not only was Keia's usage of the laws of destruction easy and natural, but it was also extremely simple. Whether it was the laws of fire or the laws of destruction, the power of the laws she used was extremely pure, without any impurities at all. They were so powerful that they completely surpassed any cultivator of the same level. The laws of destruction moved extremely quickly. In the narrow space of the arena of life and death, there was no such thing as distance. In a flash, the laws of destruction had already approached the young man. Bang! With a heavy sound, the laws of destruction had already pierced the young man's head before he could even react. Afterwards, it exploded loudly, blasting the young man's head to pieces. Red and white matter splattered everywhere. Before the Swords Wolf adventurer team could use their combined attack, one of their members had already died. This unforeseen event had clearly caught them off guard, causing them to pause slightly. They stared at the young man's headless corpse in unison as disbelief filled their faces. Just a single strike had killed one of them on the spot. What kind of strength was this? Everyone looked at Keia as their hearts churned. Only now did they realize just how terrifying of a person they had provoked. He had killed one of their companions in a single clash, preventing them from reacting at all. Even the supreme overgods on the overgod's plaque were nowhere close to his strength. Just as they were stunned, a clear thrum rang out. Jinshin arrived before them as a blur with the startling rainbow sword. He stabbed out with lightning speed. Spurt. Chapter 2001. In just the blink of an eye, 2 of the 7 overgods from the Swords Wolf adventurers who were confident that they could defeat Jinshin had died. They had been slain by a single strike from Keia and Jinshin. Not only was this deeply shocking to all the people from the Swords Wolf adventurers, but even the people below the arena were shocked. Some of the spectators were also shocked to the point of being dumbstruck. Retreat. The remaining 5 people from the Swords Wolf adventurers paled in fright. They did not have time to use a combination attack at all, so they all retreated as quickly as they could. Jianshun closed in, and the startling rainbow sword turned into a blur as it stabbed towards a second person. Jianshun's sword was just too fast. It had exceeded the range that the naked eye could capture. Although the overgods could sense it with the senses of their souls, they were unable to deal with it with their strength. Spurt. Jianshun's sword directly pierced through the head of the second overgod. In less than a few seconds, 2 overgods had died to Jianshun's hands. At the same time, Kea caught up. With a wave of his hand, the laws of destruction condensed, and he struck out mercilessly. He struck out with his palm and struck one of the overgod's heads. The terrifying laws of destruction directly dispersed the overgod's soul and cracked his head. Even though Jianshun and the Swords Wolf adventurers were fighting 3 against 7 in the arena of life and death, the difference in strength was on a completely different level. Even though there were 2 late overgods, there were only regular late overgods. Let alone the supreme overgods on the overgods plaque. They were nowhere close to the prodigies of some large sections. As a result, the battle was one-sided, or more accurately, it was a one-sided slaughter. In a single moment, only the middle-aged man who had found Jianshun in the beginning remained out of the 7 overgods of the Swords Wolf adventurers. The middle-aged man was called Qing Fan, even though he was also a late overgod, making him the most powerful person among the 7. He could not help but pale in fright when he faced Jianshun and Kea. Chills ran down his spine while his forehead became covered with a thin layer of sweat. In the blink of an eye, he was the only one left out of the 7 sovereigns. Just what kind of person had he provoked? At this moment, Qing Fan was filled with regret. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Brother, it was my fault. I, Qing Fan, would like to apologize to you and give you a gift. I hope you can be magnanimous and spare my life. Qing Fan's voice was trembling as he begged for mercy. Spare your life? Jianshun sneered. He glared at Qing Fan and said, Isn't your Swords Wolf adventurer team pretty powerful? You took the initiative to provoke us and force us into the arena of life and death. Now that we're standing in the arena of life and death, why are you begging for mercy? Don't be arrogant, sir, because you'll be the ones begging for mercy very soon. At this moment, a deep voice filled with killing intent rang out. The captain of the Swords Wolf adventurers, the Wolf King, arrived in front of the arena of life and death with the other 2 god kings of the Swords Wolf adventurers. The 3 of them seemed to be walking at a steady pace, but with every step they took, they crossed a distance of 300 meters. In just a few steps, the 3 of them passed through the boundary of the arena of life and death and appeared in the arena. Once they entered the arena of life and death, it would mean that a battle of life and death had already begun. No one would be able to leave the arena before a victor was decided. Captain, Qing Fan's eyes immediately lit up with the Wolf King's arrival. It was like he had seen the light of dawn in the dark night. He immediately became confident. While the 3 of them were distracted by the Wolf King, a vicious gleam of light flashed through Qing Fan's eyes. He silently drew a dagger and stabbed it towards Jianshun's heart. The dagger flickered with a dark blue light and radiated with an icy cold presence. It was covered in extremely powerful poison. Qing Fan's sneak attack was surprisingly successful. The dagger directly cut through Jianshun's clothes and stabbed into Jianshun's chest. Qing Fan was secretly overjoyed by the success of his sneak attack, but his face suddenly froze very soon. He widened his eyes and stared at Jianshun's chest. He was filled with disbelief. Although his dagger had stabbed into Jianshun's chest, it did not penetrate the flesh at all. It did not even leave a scratch on his skin. In particular, when the powerful force from his right hand rebounded, Qing Fan felt like his dagger had stabbed into an iron wall. How is this possible? Qing Fan was extremely shocked. Jianshun had blocked his sneak attack with just his body. He had never even seen such a powerful body before, let alone heard of it. However, before Qing Fan could think any further, a resplendent streak of light rapidly expanded in his eyes. A strand of sword chi shot out from Jianshun's hand, stabbing towards Qing Fan's forehead. Stop! The Wolf King's furious bellow rang out from nearby. He had already charged over as a blur. He wanted to save Qin Fan from Jinshan. However, it was too late. The sword chi from Jinshan's fingers left behind a bloody hole in Qin Fan's forehead. It shot into Qin Fan's soul, wiping out his soul on the spot. The captain of the Swords Wolf adventurers roared out furiously. His eyes became silver white as his presence surged. He charged towards Jinshan with murderous intent. His right hand formed a claw as the power of the laws of the divine king descended. He grabbed towards Jinshan's head mercilessly. At that moment, the 5 fingers on his right hand had silently turned into 5 sharp claws that flickered with cold light. Jinshan's face did not change. He was composed. He formed a seal with one hand, and golden Daluo sword chi condensed. It shot out with lightning speed as a dazzling streak of light. Boom! With a heavy sound, the Daluo sword chi collided with the Wolf King's claws, causing the Wolf King's body to tremble violently. He staggered backwards uncontrollably as a vicious slash appeared on his right hand. A white mark appeared on the long claw formed from his 5 fingers. Since you've already entered the arena of life and death, only the victor can leave, Jinshan said coldly. He took a step and appeared before the Wolf King, as if he had teleported. The startling rainbow sword enveloped the Wolf King in a net of swords. I never thought I'd come across a supreme overgod here. The Wolf King was stern. He howled at the sky, and his body began to swell rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he became a huge, silver-white wolf that was 10 meters long. 9 bone spurs stabbed into the back of the wolf like swords. They flickered with cold light and pulsed with powerful energy. Clearly, the captain of the Swords Wolf adventurers was not a human. His original form was a Swords Wolf. Chapter 2002. Including their captain, there were a total of 3 divine kings in the Swords Wolf adventurers. When their captain began fighting Jinshan, the other 2 divine kings struck out as well. Kea and Chanlong naturally would not just stand by and watch. They struck out together, stopping a divine king each. Although Kea was only an overgod and had only become a god recently, her battle prowess was no weaker than Jinshan's at all. In particular, even Jinshan had to admit that he was inferior to her in terms of usage and control of laws. As a result, Kea was on par with one of the divine kings from the Swords Wolf adventurers. She would even gain the upper hand from time to time. The 3 divine kings from the Swords Wolf adventurers were not particularly powerful. They were not prodigies, and they were only early divine kings. As a result, Jinshan and Kea were not as powerless as the 3 protectors from the heavenly demon religion who had hunted them down. Compared to the 2 of them, Master Chanlong was in a much worse shape. He had completely lost the upper hand. If it were not for the fact that he had a soul sealed in formation banners that could conjure a huge python with the help of formations, Master Chanlong probably would have become heavily injured from the attacks of one of the divine kings. He was a formations master after all. Casting down formations and injuring people with the way of formations was his specialty. Master Chanlong wielded a simple azure disc. As he worked with the trapped soul against one of the divine kings, he constantly formed hand seals with his hands. He tossed out formation banners one after another, casting down formations as quickly as he could. In an open battle, it might have been very difficult for Master Chanlong to defeat opponents of the same level of cultivation, but if he cast down formations, he could kill the divine king easily. In a life and death arena, as the 2 sides exchanged blows, violent roars rang out incessantly. Powerful energy waves wreaked havoc in the arena, causing many of the martial artists gathered below the arena to be extremely shocked. As the news of the battle between the divine kings in the arena of life and death spread, more and more people gathered below the arena. However, without any exception, all the people who witnessed the battle became stunned. They were extremely shocked. 3 overgods against 3 divine kings. In particular, 2 of the overgods were on par with 2 divine kings. They even seemed to possess the upper hand. This sight had an unimaginable impact on everyone below the arena. The three of them must be supreme overgods on the overgods plaque to be able to fend off divine kings as overgods. In particular, the young man and woman. I've even begun to wonder if they're the supreme overgods who rank first on the overgods plaque. We don't know how powerful the person who ranks first on the overgods plaque is, but I'm certain that the man and woman can rank in the top 10, at the very least, no, top 3. Many people below the arena of life and death gasped and sighed in amazement. At this moment, a great howl rang out. The battle between the Wolf King and Jianshan had reached its climax. It was extremely intense. The Wolf King was already covered in blood. His body was covered in vicious and terrifying slashes. In particular, only 6 of the 9 bone spurs on his back remained. Jianshan had severed 3 of them. Jianshan's clothes were in tatters as well. It was impossible to tell whether the blood was his or the Wolf King's blood. At this moment, 3 old men sat in a luxuriously decorated room on the top floor of the spatial battleship. The 3 old men seemed extremely ordinary on the surface. As their presences were concealed, they seemed like mortals. However, their gazes were extremely unusual. From time to time, their indifferent gazes would be as profound as the universe. They were boundless. 3 overgods fighting 3 divine kings. That's extremely rare. I never thought something so interesting would happen on our spatial battleship. A white-robed, ruddy old man chuckled. Beside the white-robed, ruddy old man was a wrinkled old man in plain clothes. He nodded in agreement and sighed emotionally. The 3 overgods we came across so casually are actually so powerful. In particular, the woman's usage of the laws of destruction and the laws of fire has even made old man admire her. And the young man with the sword is extremely outstanding as well. I just don't know what cultivation method he practices. I can sense a sense of brutality that's different from the laws of destruction from the cultivation method. As for the old man, although his battle prowess isn't particularly outstanding, the formations he has cast down are extremely extraordinary. Sigh, it's been so long since I've been outside. Are all the juniors of this generation so outstanding? Not all the juniors of this generation are so outstanding. It's just that a few of them just happen to be together, the red-robed old man said. In the end, a red-robed old man spoke. He was the expert who had repelled Huayan for Jianshan outside the spatial battleship and destroyed one of Huayan's arms. It's rare to see 3 overgods fight 3 divine king at the same time. Red Devil, Muhi, it'll be a pity if we don't have some fun. Why don't we make a bet? The ruddy old man in white robes chuckled and continued. I think it's called the Swords Wolf Adventurers or something. Out of the 3 God Kings, only the Swords Wolf is somewhat presentable. He possesses a sliver of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. In particular, the last of the 9 bone swords on his back has already condensed a sliver of the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Once the power of the bloodline within the last bone sword is unleashed, it can basically kill early God Kings in a single strike. Only prodigies can stop it. Why don't we take a gamble and see who will emerge victorious between the Swords Wolf and the kid with the sword? Is there even a need to make a bet? The young man with the sword might be on par with the Swords Wolf, even gaining the upper hand from time to time, but that's only because the Swords Wolf hasn't used the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Once he does, the kid with the sword will be half dead, even if he doesn't die. Of course, the precondition is that the woman who comprehended the laws of destruction and divine fire and the old man who is setting up the formation don't go and help. Muhi, who was dressed in plain clothes and had a face full of wrinkles, glared and said angrily. The red-robed Red Devil, who had saved Jianshan from Huayan, smiled faintly. He said, since the battle hasn't ended yet, there's naturally no conclusion as to who will emerge victorious. Let's make a bet and see who will emerge victorious. The old man will split up the space the 3 of them are in, so they won't be able to work together against the Swords Wolf. Please place your bets. I'll bet a piece of true gold of Buddha that the Swords Wolf will emerge victorious. I'll also bet on the Swords Wolf's victory with a first-grade God tier healing pill. The 2 old men placed their bets very quickly and chose the Swords Wolf. The Red Devil smiled faintly. Since you've chosen the Swords Wolf, I obviously can't follow you. I'll choose the young man with the sword. I'll bet on his victory. Chapter 2003. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline is very powerful, but there's only a sliver of it condensed from the ninth bone spur of the Sword Wolf. If he uses it well, he can indeed dominate those at the same level of cultivation, but if he doesn't, Hong Mo smiled mysteriously. The powerful senses of his soul had already enveloped the entire arena of life and death. He was paying close attention to the battle between Jianshun and the Sword Wolf. It looks like Hong Mo doesn't have high hopes for the Sword Wolf. If that's the case, let's wait and see. I refuse to believe that the Sword Wolf that has reached the level of the Divine King and possesses the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf will lose to an overgod. In the arena of life and death, Jianshun and the Wolf King's clash became more and more intense. Their figures had already become blurry blurs. They fought so quickly that many overgods struggled to catch sight of them. They could only observe with the senses of their souls. It had to be mentioned that the Wolf King was very powerful. Although Jianshun had already fought against 3 early Divine King, their battle experience was nowhere close to the Wolf King's. Even though the Wolf King was also an early Divine King, as the captain of an adventurer's group, the battles and trials of life and death he had experienced were much more abundant than the disciples of many large sections. Coupled with the Wolf King's extraordinary bloodline and magical beast body, he possessed battle prowess greater than most human Divine Kings. In the end, the battle between Jianshun and the Wolf King became extremely difficult. At this moment, an extremely powerful pulse of energy shook up the arena of life and death. 5 of the 6 remaining bone swords on the Wolf King's back suddenly shone with silver-white light. Every single bone sword possessed extremely active, violent energy, and they stabbed out with lightning speed. Jianshun's eyes narrowed. With a great bellow, he clenched his left hand into a fist and struck out with the power of laws and chaotic force. He blocked one of the bone swords that had shot towards his forehead. Immediately, blood splattered. Jianshun's left hand was reduced to a bloody mess. The bones in his hand had basically been shattered. The remaining 4 bone swords pulsed with energy as they shot over as blurs. They arrived before Jianshun in a single instance. Jianshun did not dodge the remaining 4 bone swords. Determination filled his eyes as he charged forward, directly using his body to endure the damage from the 4 bone swords. The startling rainbow sword in his right hand shone brightly at that moment, shooting towards the Wolf King's head with lightning speed. Jianshun was clearly trying to trade injury for injury. The Wolf King obviously understood what Jianshun was trying to do. Madness in his eyes as well. He made the decision to trade Jianshun's life for life. Spurt, 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 spurt. The Wolf King's 4 bone swords pierced Jianshun's body at basically the same time. The white bone swords that were stained with chaotic blood stabbed out from Jianshun's back. Dark red blood dripped from the bone swords. Each droplet of blood pulsed with powerful energy. However, Jianshun did not even grunt. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth as the startling rainbow sword in his right hand stabbed towards the Wolf King's forehead like a bolt of lightning. Sword chi surged like a rainbow as the sharp tip of the sword arrived before the Wolf King's forehead in a single instance. In that critical moment, the Wolf King tilted his head slightly, dodging Jianshun's fatal strike. As a result, the sword stabbed into his neck instead. The sword chi that was as beautiful as a waterfall almost chopped off the Wolf King's head, leaving only a layer of skin holding it together. It was also at this moment that Jianshun's body suddenly trembled violently. A tearing force suddenly appeared from the 4 bone swords in his body, as if they wanted to rip his body to pieces. Chaotic blood gushed out from his wounds. Jianshun circulated his chaotic force as he pushed the defenses of the chaotic body to the limit. He blocked the tearing force from his bones as he swung the startling rainbow sword at the Wolf King's back. Ding! With a clear sound, the 5 bone swords on the Wolf King's back had all been severed by Jianshun. 8 of the 9 bone swords had been severed. Only 1 remained. Jianshun struck out extremely quickly. After severing the 5 bone swords, the startling rainbow sword turned into a blur again, swinging towards the Wolf King's head. Killing me won't be that easy, let alone a mere overgod like you. But even if you break through to the level of the Divine King, you won't be able to kill me because I possess the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Dying to my bloodline is a great honor for you. At this moment, the Wolf King's voice rang out in Jinshin's head. The voice was filled with extremely intense hatred. Using the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline came at an extremely heavy price. He would be heavily injured. The Wolf King had never thought that he would be forced into such a state by a mere overgod. However, there was nothing he could do. This overgod was just too impressive. He even suspected that even the supreme overgod who ranked first on the overgod's plaque would not be able to gain an advantage over this person. With that, a power of destruction so great that it made even Jinshin shiver suddenly appeared. The 9th bone sword on the Wolf King's back suddenly shone with dazzling red light. The terrifying energy slumbering within had suddenly awakened at that moment. Jinshin stared at the 9th bone sword on the Wolf King's back as he became extremely stern. He could sense the presence of death from the 9th bone sword. The power that had awakened from the 9th bone sword made him shiver in fear. However, Jinshin gritted his teeth and continued to move. He continued to stab the Wolf King's head with the startling rainbow sword. As long as the Wolf King's soul was pulverized and his soul was wiped out, he would not be able to use anything no matter how powerful he was. However, just when Jinshin's startling rainbow sword was halfway there, a dazzling red light appeared before his eyes. The light was so powerful that it directly passed through the arena of life and death, dyeing the huge space on the spatial battleship red. A red streak of light shone from the 9th bone sword, directly shooting towards Jinshin. Jinshin's body immediately stiffened, locked onto by the red light. He felt like he could not move at all, even when he struggled as hard as he could, even when he circulated his chaotic force madly. He was unable to regain his freedom. The presence of death rapidly approached him. Jinshin, on the other side, Kea had already finished her battle. She had killed an elder of the Divine King from the Sword's Wolf adventurers with a sword of laws formed from the laws of destruction. She immediately cried out when she sensed that Jinshin was in danger and charged over as quickly as she could. Master Chanlong had cast down a formation as well, trapping the other elder of the Sword's Wolf adventurers. Her face changed slightly when she saw how Jinshin had been immobilized by the red light. She immediately tossed her azure disc over. However, before Kea could approach Jinshin, she seemed to have collided with a spatial barrier and was knocked back. There seemed to be an invisible wall in front of her that separated the ring into 2 worlds, preventing her from approaching Jinshin. On the other side, Master Chanlong's azure disc collided with the spatial barrier as well. Just like Kea, she was unable to approach Jinshin at all. At this moment, the red light that shot out from the 9th bone sword on the Sword Wolf's back had almost reached Jinshin's forehead. The situation was extremely dangerous. Chapter 2004. Right at this moment of life and death, an extremely powerful sword chi that was sufficient to shake the heavens and the earth suddenly appeared. It filled the entire space, causing the expressions of all the spectators below the life and death arena to change greatly. 2 finger-sized strands of sword chi hovered above Jinshin's head as they shone with dazzling white light. Although the sword chi was small, the presence they gave off was enough to shake up the surroundings. All the overgods felt fear, and even the Divine King would be moved. The kid with the sword is about to die. Like I said, not only is the Sword Wolf at the Divine King's level, but it also possesses the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. The kid with the sword is definitely not its opponent. Hong Mo, you're definitely going to lose this time. At the top of the spatial battleship, the white-robed old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion said with a smile. Although the young man with the sword has lost to a Sword Wolf, he's still extremely impressive for being able to force a Divine King's level Sword Wolf into such a state as an overgod. If it weren't for the fact that the Sword Wolf possessed the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf, and could use the power of its bloodline, he definitely wouldn't have been able to defeat the young man. Muhi sighed gently. His face was filled with pity. Muhi, why you seem so melancholy? What's there to sigh about? The saint's world is so large, and there are so many supreme prodigies, but just how many of them can truly stand at the apex? Don't they all die along the way? Who knows how many prodigies have died in the past few years? I've already become numb to it, the white-robed old man said calmly. Then he looked at Hong Mo, and a sliver of excitement appeared in his eyes. He said, Hong Mo, you've lost the bet this time. According to your promise from before, the 2 third-grade God-tier healing pills should... The white-robed old man came to a halt when he reached there. A sliver of surprise appeared on his face, and he could not help but cry out, What sword chi is this? It's actually so powerful. How can such powerful sword chi appear on an over-god? The Red Devil, who was originally expressionless, revealed a faint smile at this time. He muttered to himself, I knew it. A person who can make the heavenly demon religion's vice hierarch, Huayan, personally pursue him is definitely not as simple as he seems on the surface. Right now, the outcome of the battle has yet to be decided on the arena of life and death. As soon as the 2 strands of profound sword chi above Jinshin's head appeared, they shot out like 2 bolts of lightning. It was as if there was no distance in front of them. In a flash, the 2 strands of profound sword chi collided with the red light. Boom! With a great sound, Jinshin's 2 strands of profound sword chi collapsed, vanishing in a single moment. However, the red light from a 9th bone sword on the Wolf King's back was clearly much more powerful than Jinshin's profound sword chi. Although the red light was dispersed as well, only 2/3 of it was dispersed. A third of its power remained, shooting towards Jinshin without slowing down at all. Jinshin had already recovered his mobility from the collision of the profound sword chi and the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. However, shooting out the 2 strands of profound sword chi had basically drained all the power of his soul. His body immediately shook a few times, and he almost lost his footing. His feet became wobbly as well. He was unable to dodge the incoming power of the bloodline at all. All he could do was stab the startling rainbow sword into the Wolf King's head as quickly as possible. Spurt! The startling rainbow sword pierced the Wolf King's head, wiping out his soul. Afterwards, due to the force of the stab being too great, the sword pierced through the Wolf King's head and stabbed into the arena of life and death heavily, nailing the Wolf King's head to the ground. Kacha! A crisp sound rang out from the startling rainbow sword. Dense cracks rapidly spread across the startling rainbow sword, covering the entire sword very soon. In the next moment, the startling rainbow sword directly collapsed, reduced to fragments. The startling rainbow sword was already covered in cracks. After the battle, it finally shattered, ending its mission. At the same time, Jinshin was struck by the remaining power of the bloodline. Blood spurted from his mouth as he was blown far away, slamming into the boundary of the arena of life and death. The spatial barrier that separated Jinshin from Kea, Chanlong, and the others vanished with the Wolf King's death. As soon as the barrier vanished, Kea immediately rushed over to Jinshin. He took out the best healing pill he had on him and fed it to Jinshin. His face was filled with concern. Don't worry, I'm fine. I won't die, Jinshin said weakly. He endured the pain and struggled to sit up. He then took out a large number of healing pills from his space ring and swallowed them all. At the same time, he circulated his chaotic force to heal. He was extremely heavily injured from the battle against the Wolf King, but fortunately, he had the support of the chaotic body. Otherwise, if it were someone else, they probably would have died long ago. It would have been impossible for them to last until now. Spurt. Suddenly, another mouthful of blood spurted from Jinshin's mouth. His face had already become pale, and he seemed rather haggard. His wounds were not a problem. With the recovery rate of his chaotic body, he would make a full recovery before long. However, Jinshin had never thought that a portion of the red light would remain in his body when it struck him. Even though there was very little of the energy, it was extremely powerful. Even when Jinshin used his chaotic force, he was unable to clear it out. He could only use his chaotic force to temporarily trap the energy, preventing it from destroying his body. Is this the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline that the captain of the Swords Wolf adventurers mentioned? It really is very powerful. With my current cultivation, I really can't do anything about it, Jinshin thought. As soon as he thought about the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, he felt lingering fear. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline was just too powerful. Even when he sent out 2 strands of profound sword chi, he was still at a disadvantage. He only managed to disperse a portion of it and weaken the power of the bloodline. Otherwise, Jinshin believed that he would probably be dead, even with his chaotic body, if he faced the full power of the bloodline. Arc. With a chilling cry, the last divine king of the Swords Wolf adventurers died to Master Chanlong's killing formation. Now, all the experts of the Swords Wolf adventurers were dead. Only a few gods remained. It was clearly impossible for Jinshin to recover from his wounds in the arena of life and death. After forcefully stabilizing his wounds, he stood up from the ground and walked up to collect the Wolf King's space ring. Afterwards, he arrived before the Wolf King's corpse and stared at the only intact 9th bone sword on its back. He could vaguely sense that the bone sword possessed the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. The power of the bloodline had not been completely depleted after the Wolf King's attack, so a portion of it remained in the bone sword. After a moment of hesitation, Jinshin stepped on the Wolf King's corpse and gripped the 9th bone sword tightly. With a sudden tug, he directly plucked the bone sword from the Wolf King's corpse. After removing the monster core from the Wolf King's body, he left the arena of life and death. Kea and Master Chanlong accepted the space rings of the other 2 Divine King Elders before leaving the arena with Jinshin. Out of the 3 Divine King of the Swords Wolf adventurers, only the captain was a magical beast. As a result, the other 2 Divine King Elders naturally did not possess monster cores. Only a while after Jinshin, Master Chanlong, and Master Chanlong had left did a series of deafening cries erupt from the arena of life and death. At that moment, all the people who had witnessed the battle had gone mad. They were all thrown into an uproar. They had personally witnessed 3 overgods slay 3 Divine King Elders in an open battle. To them, this was something that could only happen in legends. It was something that they would never forget. Afterwards, the news of the 3 overgods slaying the 3 Divine King Elders in the arena of life and death spread across the entire spatial battleship very quickly, causing a great uproar. Jinshin, Kea, and Chanlong, who had caused this uproar, had openly taken over the high-class cabins that originally belonged to the 3 Divine King Elders of the Swords Wolf adventurers. Afterwards, they remained in their rooms to heal. The 3 of them were injured to varying degrees in this battle. In particular, Jinshin was the most heavily injured out of the 3 of them because he had fought against the strongest member of the Swords Wolf adventurers, the Swords Wolf adventurers. Jinshin currently sat on his jade bed in the luxurious room of the high-class cabin. His brows were tightly furrowed. He had tried to use his chaotic force to purge the remnant bloodline of the ancient Skywolf in his body more than once, but to his frustration, the bloodline was extremely tough. Even when he used all the chaotic force within him, he was unable to weaken the power of the bloodline at all. If the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline continued to linger in his body, the bloodline power of the ancient Skywolf would wreak havoc in his body once the chaotic force was no longer able to restrain it. Chapter 2005. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed since the battle in the arena of life and death. During those 3 days, Jinshin had completely recovered from his wounds thanks to the unimaginable healing abilities of the chaotic body. Only the sliver of power from the ancient Skywolf's bloodline remained. He was unable to purge it at all. He could only let it remain in his body and use a portion of his chaotic force to suppress it. Afterwards, Jinshin took out the Wolf King's space ring and immediately sent the senses of his soul into it. The Wolf King's space ring was filled to the brim with various items. Aside from a large number of divine crystals and pills, there were also various materials for forging artifacts and heavenly resources for refining pills. The space ring contained all the wealth of a divine king. Although it was nowhere close to the wealth of the commander of the Ninth Army of the Heavenly Demon Religion, it was still quite a large sum to Jianshin. This is cloud-curling rock. There's actually 5 elemental essence as well. At this moment, Jianshin's eyes lit up. He immediately became excited. He had discovered 2 more materials for forging the azulite swords in the Wolf King's space ring. Without any hesitation, he immediately stowed away the cloud sweep rock and the metal essence of 5 elements. The materials needed to forge the twin swords are becoming fewer and fewer. However, when I was collecting the materials, I could only move about within the divine kingdom of Pingtian due to the limitations of my strength. As a result, collecting them was naturally difficult. But now that my strength has increased, the level of contact I can make has gradually increased as well. I believe the remaining materials will become easier to collect, Jianshin thought. He was filled with eagerness, eagerly anticipating the day when he could forge the azulite swords again. The startling rainbow sword has already shattered. I need to find a suitable flying sword as soon as possible, or my battle prowess will be greatly affected. Jianshin got off the jade bed and made his way out of the room. Kea and Chanlong lived next door to him. As soon as he opened the door, Jianshin discovered a black-clothed man standing outside emotionlessly. His clothes were embroidered with the image of a spatial battleship. Jianshin learnt the man's identity when he saw the image on his clothes. He had learnt from Master Chanlong that all the people who wore clothes like this were the enforcers of the spatial battleship. Jianshin was rather surprised that the enforcer of the spatial battleship was standing outside his room. "Sir, the elder invites you in." The enforcer of the spatial battleship spoke. He remained emotionless and spoke stiffly, giving off an extremely cold feeling. Jianshin hesitated slightly before nodding. "Let me visit a friend first, and then I'll go over." Jianshin was not surprised by the elder's summons. At the same time, he was unable to turn him down. The outer space of the Saint's world was not as peaceful as it seemed on the surface. It was even more dangerous than land. As spatial battleships flew through outer space, they would come across various dangers from time to time. Even when the spatial battleships were covered in powerful formations, they were unable to ensure their safety. As a result, there would be experts accompanying every spatial battleship. They would protect the spatial battleship as it flew through outer space. They were supreme existences within the spatial battleship. They were respected as elders, and they were in charge of everything within the spatial battleship. Afterwards, Jianshin went to Kea and Chanlong's rooms. After learning that their wounds were no longer a problem, he followed the enforcer to the top floor of the spatial battleship. As he made his way to the top floor, Jianshin could not help but think of Master Chanlong. Jianshin had no idea how to define Master Chanlong. The two of them were not exactly friends. Strictly speaking, they had once been enemies. However, due to the presence of Kea, the relationship between Jianshin and Master Chanlong had become extremely strange. Their original hostility had silently changed as well. The grievances between the two of them seemed to vanish unknowingly. Moreover, he had only managed to board the spatial battleship because of Chanlong's assistance when he was hunted down by Huayan. Even though he knew that Master Chanlong's main objective was to save Kea, he had also used this opportunity to break free from Huayan's pursuit. As a result, he felt like he owed Chanlong a favor. "We're here. The elders are inside. You can go in by yourself." At this moment, the enforcer's voice rang out in Jianshin's head. Unknowingly, he had already arrived at the top floor of the spatial battleship. Jianshin clasped his fist at the enforcer before directly pushing open the door. As soon as he entered, he discovered 3 old men seated there. As the 3 old men had concealed their presences, they were just 3 ordinary old men in Jianshin's eyes. However, Jianshin knew that the 3 old men before him were peak experts who had reached the primordial realm. However, when Jianshin saw the red-robed old man, his eyes immediately narrowed. Vaguely, he seemed to remember that Huayan had attacked him several times when he was about to board the spatial battleship. Fortunately, a red-robed old man had appeared at the crucial moment and stopped Huayan allowing him and Kea to board the spatial battleship successfully. Jinshin immediately understood that the red-robed old man was the expert who had stopped Hawaiian in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. He immediately clasped his fist and bowed. "Junior Jinshin, thanks Senior for saving my life." Hong Imo smiled faintly. "You don't need to thank me. I didn't intervene to save you. Instead, it was because the old man was the protector of the spatial battleship, so he naturally wouldn't let anyone on board be harmed. Otherwise, the old man would lose face." Hong Imo paused when he reached there. He studied Jinshin seriously and praised. "Jinshin, you're very impressive. You're extremely outstanding. You've actually defeated a divine king swordwolf as a late overgod. Moreover, it was a swordwolf that possessed a sliver of the ancient skywolf's bloodline. The swordwolf possessed the power of the ancient skywolf's bloodline. There were very few people who were his opponent at the same level of cultivation. Once he used the power of his bloodline, even mid-divine kings had a very high chance of dying, let alone early divine kings. However, you actually survived. This was something that the old man never expected." Jinshin could not help but feel even more curious about the ancient skywolf after hearing about the power of the ancient skywolf's bloodline again. He asked, "Senior, is the ancient skywolf very powerful?" Obviously, the bloodline of the ancient skywolf is equivalent to the war god of the God Clan. It's only slightly weaker than the war god of the God Clan. The ancient skywolf was once one of the grand exalts of our saint's world. So do you think it's powerful or not? If it weren't for the fact that the power of the ancient skywolf's bloodline was extremely thin, it would have been impossible for you to survive until now. The white-robed, ruddy old man glared at Jinshin as he spoke. There was some undisguised anger on his face. Jinshin had caused him to lose an extremely precious material. It was the main material for forging god artifacts. He had collected it after great difficulty, yet he had lost it to Hong Mo in the bet earlier. Jinshin was stunned. He was greatly surprised. He had never thought that the ancient skywolf would actually be a grand exalt of the saint's world. Chapter 2006. The white-robed old man paused before continuing. "Above the divine king is the primordial realm. I think you know that as well. The primordial realm is split into 3 great realms. The 3 great realms are the first, infinite prime, the second, chaotic prime, and the third, grand prime. Grand prime is the end of the primordial realm. It's the final level of cultivation. At the same time, it's the existence that stands at the apex of the saint's world. However, grand prime is a major realm of cultivation, so there are naturally differences in strength between grand primes. They're split into the first heavenly layer to the 9th heavenly layer. The first heavenly layer to the 3rd heavenly layer are early grand primes. The 4th heavenly layer to the 6th heavenly layer are mid-grand primes, and the 7th heavenly layer to the 9th heavenly layer are late grand primes. Across the 49 great planes and 81 great planets of the saint's world, there are quite a few grand primes, but basically all of them are grand primes from the 1st heavenly layer to the 6th heavenly layer. In other words, they're early and mid-grand primes. There are extremely few late grand primes. As a matter of fact, many great planes and planets don't even have late grand primes, let alone late grand primes. They don't even have mid-grand primes. Logically speaking, the 9th heavenly layer of late grand prime is the limit of the primordial realm, but in reality, the 9th heavenly layer of grand prime is not the limit of the path of cultivation. Some prodigies with unprecedented talent can completely comprehend the endless mysteries of the universe, allowing them to comprehend laws to the limit. As a result, they can take a step further from the 9th heavenly layer of grand prime and reach a higher level of cultivation. Although this level is still grand prime, people who reach this level of cultivation are unimaginably powerful. They're basically above the laws, like they've become the laws of the world. It's extremely terrifying. In order to show enough respect to these experts who have reached this level of cultivation, and at the same time, to highlight them even more, these experts are given the title of Grand Exalt. In the entire Saint's world, there are only a handful of people who can be given the title of Grand Exalt. As for the ancient Skywolf, He was a supreme expert who obtained the title of Grand Exalt. With that, the old man looked at Jianshan and said, "You should know how powerful the ancient Skywolf is now, right?" Jianshan had gained some understanding of Grand Exalts from the sword spirits. However, the old man believed that it was impossible for Jianshan, who was only an overgod, to come into contact with such matters. However, Jianshan still became slightly doubtful when he heard the old man's explanation. He could not help but think about what he had gone through in the Enita Grand Prime's residence in the lower world. He could not help but ask, "Senior, I once heard that there are 100 layers to the laws, and the 100th layer is the limit. As long as you comprehend the 100th layer, you'll become a Grand Exalt." A gleam of light flashed through the eyes of the three seated old men when they heard that. They glanced at Jianshan deeply, and the old man said rather in surprise, "I never thought you would actually know about such ancient information." That's right, there are indeed 100 layers to the laws, but this distinction is extremely ancient, so ancient that even old man has only heard about it in legends. However, no matter how it is divided, it's just a different name. There's not much of a difference in reality. That's right. For example, the immortals world that stands against us has a completely different name for each cultivation level compared to our saints' world. But the laws they comprehend are the same as our saints' world. "It's still the 3,000 ways of the universe," said the old man in red robes. Jinshin's mind shuddered when he heard the immortals world. He naturally became vigilant from the depths of his heart, and he hid the twin swords deeply. Fortunately, he was no longer the same as before. As a result, unless the three primordial realm experts personally investigated his body, it would be impossible for them to discover the existence of the twin swords. Moreover, as his strength increased in the future, his ability to hide the twin swords would become better and better as well. "Jianshan, can you let me take a look at the Swordwolf's bone sword?" The old man looked at Jianshan indifferently. Of course, Jianshan agreed without any hesitation. He immediately took out the bone sword from his space ring. The old man studied the bone sword for a while before sighing gently. He said in pity, "Although it possesses a sliver of the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, it's just too thin. If the power of the bloodline was a little denser, old man might have spent a great deal of money to purchase this bone sword from you." The red-robed old man returned the bone sword to Jianshan and said regretfully, "There really isn't much value in collecting this bone sword. The power of the bloodline within it is useless to us." Jianshan was speechless when he heard the old man's words. The bone sword possessed a sliver of the power of the Grand Exalt's bloodline, so it should have been a priceless item in his eyes. However, it was not even worth collecting to the old man. It was not just the red-robed old man. He discovered that the two other primordial realm experts treated the bone sword with indifference as well, as if it really was nothing valuable. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline is extremely special. It can't be absorbed at all. Even if we give it to the Wolf clan, it's useless to them because the power of the bloodline is naturally condensed. It's a natural item. Perhaps the old man saw through Jinshan's doubts, so he explained. Jianshan came to a realization when he heard that. He could not help but think of the white tiger. In the past, when the ruler of the beast god continent wanted to steal the bloodline of the white tiger, he could only take over the white tiger's body through possession. He did not use any other methods. This was because the power of the bloodline was indeed very difficult to steal. Apart from possession, there were basically no other methods. Afterwards, the three old men asked Jianshan a few more questions. They were just asking about his master, his background, and so on. Jianshan had already thought of an excuse to answer the three old men's questions. He used fairy Haoyue and made up some lies to fool them. The three old men did not make things difficult for Jianshan. After understanding Jianshan's basic situation, they let Jianshan leave. "Hong Mo, what do you think of this child?" Mui looked at Hong Mo and asked after Jianshan had left. Hong Mo nodded. "This child is pretty good. He can kill the Divine King as a late overgod. Once he becomes a Divine King in the future, he'll definitely be an expert who stands above the Divine King. However, it's just that his cultivation is a little too lacking. If he becomes a Divine King, We can place great hopes on him. The Neptunian Divine Palace opened once every 10,000 years. Looking at the time, it should be opening soon. That's the battlefield of the Divine King. Even if he enters as an overgod, he'll only be able to barely protect himself. We obtained this Neptunian medallion after so much difficulty, so we can't waste it like this. Let's give up on the Poseidon Palace this time and wait for the next 10,000 years. If Jianshun doesn't die, he'll definitely become a divine king in 10,000 years. At that time, we can give him the Neptunian medallion and get him to retrieve what's inside for us. During this time, I'll send people to investigate Jianshun's background and identity. I want to see if he's telling the truth and if he's worthy of our trust. Jianshun sat on the jade bed in the high-class cabin of the spatial battleship. He studied the ninth bone sword that contained a sliver of the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. He extended the senses of his soul into the bone sword to check the sliver of ancient Skywolf's bloodline. He wanted to see if he could use the bone spear to dissolve the power of the bloodline that remained in his body. As the senses of Jianshun's soul rapidly penetrated the bone sword, he gradually saw the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within the bone spur. It was only a thumb-sized red mist. Perhaps because the power of the bloodline was just too thin, it had not even condensed into a liquid. Even though it was very thin, its power was undeniable. Jianshun could clearly sense a desolate, ancient presence from the power of the bloodline. It also seemed to possess the wildness and unruliness of a wild beast. However, at this moment, Jianshun's face changed slightly. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline that he suppressed actually began to surge violently at that moment, as if it wanted to break free from Jianshun's suppression. With a thought, Jianshun immediately controlled the chaotic force to increase the suppression, firmly suppressing the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Chapter 2007. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within the bone sword moved extremely quickly. Even though Jianshun had already sensed its movement, he was unable to stop it in time. In a single moment, the power of the bloodline had entered Jianshun's body through his hands. Jianshun's heart suddenly sank. Without any hesitation, he immediately controlled his chaotic force to stop the power of the bloodline. Boom! Even though there was only a sliver of the power of the bloodline, the power within it could not be underestimated. When the two powers collided, they immediately erupted with a boom. Spurt! Jianshun vomited blood as his body trembled violently. The two powers collided within him, turning his body into a battlefield. He was quite injured as blood oozed out of his pores. If it were not for the fact that he cultivated the chaotic body and possessed an extremely tough body, the collision of the two powers probably would have been enough to shatter his body to pieces. The two powers of the bloodlines rapidly approached each other in Jianshun's body. They collided with Jianshun's chaotic force from the inside and the outside as if they wanted to fuse together. Suppressing one of the powers of the bloodlines took up most of Jianshun's strength. Now that the two powers of the bloodlines were attacking him from the inside and the outside, the pressure on Jianshun was not as simple as 1+1. As a result, Jianshun only lasted for a few seconds before a gap appeared in the chaotic force, allowing the two powers of the bloodlines to completely fuse together in his body. Jianshun cursed inside. Just a single power of the bloodline was enough to render him helpless. Now that the two powers of the bloodline had fused together and become even more powerful, his heart sank to rock bottom. Before Jianshun could think too much, a desolate and ancient presence suddenly appeared. After the two powers of the bloodlines of the ancient Skywolf fused together, they seemed to become a single entity. They radiated with a vast presence that shocked even Jianshun. Just a rough sense of the presence gave Jianshun an extremely ancient and distant feeling. It seemed to have existed for countless years, as deep as the vast cosmos. Jianshun was brought into an extremely ancient time under the influence of the presence. In a daze, he seemed to see an ancient Skywolf whose body alone filled up half the space there. It stood on the celestial bodies as it radiated with a terrifying presence that struck fear into the world. It raised its head and let out a long, high-pitched howl. Under its howl, space distorted and time vanished. Even the laws of the world fell into disarray. Spurt! Jianchun vomited blood again. His soul shook violently as the blurry image appeared in his head, creating a huge image in his soul. In particular, the pressure from the ancient skywolf made Jianchun feel like his soul was about to collapse. At the same time, the power of the bloodline that had fused with Jianchun shook violently. It rampaged through his body restlessly, filled with destructive power. Jianchun gritted his teeth and guarded his mind. He tried his best to cut off the influence of the desolate presence on his soul. He controlled all the chaotic force to suppress the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. He even used the laws of the Way of the Sword, combining them with the chaotic force to suppress the bloodline power. However, this was still not enough. After all, the two powers of the bloodline had become even more powerful after fusing. Even though it was very thin, it possessed an absolute advantage in terms of level. At the very least, it was several levels more powerful than Jianchun's half-baked chaotic force. Master, we're here to lend you a hand. At this moment, the voices of the sword spirits rang out in Jianchun's head. Afterwards, origin energy that belonged to the sword spirits appeared in Jianchun's body. It moved through Jianchun's body extremely slowly and carefully, joining in the suppression of the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. In the past few years, the sword spirits had always been slumbering in order to recover their vitality. They rarely woke up. However, it had to be mentioned that ever since Jianchun had come to the Saints' world, the sword spirits had indeed recovered much faster than on the Tian Yuan continent. They had recovered some of their vitality now. Even though they were still far from their peak condition, they were able to assist Jianchun somewhat. However, their identities were just too special, so they could only hide themselves deep within Jianchun's body. They dared not show themselves in the Saints' world. Even when assisting Jianchun in suppressing the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, they were extremely careful. They concealed all of their presence, not letting it leak out at all. After sensing the power of the sword spirits, the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline suddenly shuddered. It seemed to sense a great sense of danger, so it immediately fell silent. It was filled with caution and vigilance. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline was indeed an extremely high level, but the sword spirits were on an even higher level. This was because the sword spirits were split into yin and yang from chaos. They were spirits condensed from a strand of yin and yang qi. They were truly undying and everlasting. Back then, the fusion of the twin swords had failed. Even their old master, who had reached Grand Exalt and truly possessed the ability to reach the heavens, had died because of it. However, the sword spirits had survived. Of course, they had paid a heavy price as well. Finally, with the assistance of the sword spirits, the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline was finally suppressed by Jianchun. However, Jianchun was unable to rejoice. Not only did he use all of his chaotic force to suppress it, but he even used the power of the laws of the sword. He had basically done everything he could. He was unable to move about in the outside world with the current situation. At this moment, Jianchun's mind was affected once again. The desolate and ancient presence from the power of the bloodline made him feel like he was seeing the Skywolf that filled up half the sky and stood on the stars, howling at the sky. Jianchun's soul trembled violently once again. The indescribably terrifying pressure from the ancient Skywolf deeply shocked his soul, making him feel like his soul was about to collapse once again. This time, Jianchun was clearly able to last a little longer when he observed the might of the ancient Skywolf, because the power of the bloodline was no longer wreaking havoc in his body. However, he only lasted for half a cup of tea's worth of time before he felt a strong sense of dizziness, forcing Jianchun out of the state. In that short amount of time, the power of Jianchun's soul that he had just recovered was completely depleted once again. Intense dizziness accompanied by a splitting headache made Jianchun tempted to immediately fall asleep. Jianshun immediately took out several soul recovery pills and ingested them. Fortunately, he had purchased quite a few soul recovery pills in the imperial capital of the Xiandao dynasty. Coupled with the fact that he still had some in the Wolf King's space ring, he had quite a lot of them on him right now. Chapter 2008. This droplet of power from the ancient Skywolf's bloodline can actually help me condense my soul. Not only has my soul become more condensed, but it's also become more powerful. Jianshun was extremely surprised. This discovery was definitely a pleasant surprise for him. Jianshun swallowed several soul recovery pills in excitement, recovering the power of his soul as quickly as possible. The soul recovery pills recovered the power of the soul extremely quickly. A while later, the power of Jianshun's soul had fully recovered. Without any hesitation, he immediately repeated his actions from before, comprehending the image of the ancient Skywolf from the droplet of power from the bloodline again. Immediately, the scene from before appeared in Jianshun's head again. Jianshun had no idea why the desolate and ancient presence from the droplet of power from the bloodline would allow him to comprehend something like this. He only knew that the existence of the droplet of power from the ancient Skywolf's bloodline would increase his strength. It was still the same familiar sight. It was still the colossal, majestic Skywolf that stood in the air, radiating with an extremely terrifying presence. Jianshun's soul was heavily impacted once again. At that moment, he felt like he was a lone boat in a turbulent sea, about to capsize and drown at any time. He even felt like his soul was about to collapse. With the lesson from before, Jianshun guarded his mind and carefully observed his soul this time. Very soon, he discovered to his surprise that the power of his soul was rapidly depleted under the pressure, but his soul was indeed slowly growing, becoming stronger and stronger. The power of the soul can actually be strengthened like this? No, my soul hasn't strengthened because of the pressure. Instead, the desolate and ancient presence from the droplet of power from the ancient Skywolf's bloodline is fusing with my soul. The reason why my soul has strengthened is because of this presence. Jianshun discovered the secret to the strengthening of his soul very soon. This made him frown, and he immediately checked if there were any hidden problems after absorbing the desolate and ancient presence. However, Jianshun's heart suddenly sank when he checked. There was a strand of red energy filled with an evil presence in his soul. This was the remnant energy from the crisis of the world he had devoured back on the Tianyuan continent. It had already fused with his soul. At this moment, he discovered that instead of him absorbing the desolate presence from the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, it was more accurate to say that the evil power was absorbing the presence. However, because his Yuan spirit had fused with the evil force, his Yuan spirit also benefited when the evil force absorbed the desolate presence of the bloodline power. So, it's actually because of you that my soul has strengthened, Jianshun thought. Jianshun fell silent. He had no idea whether he should continue absorbing the energy to strengthen his soul or stop immediately. His soul contained a sliver of the vengeful spirit's power. It was filled with far too many uncertainties. It had even interfered with his soul in the past, causing him to lose his mind and descend into madness. His strength had increased extremely rapidly in the past few years, so he could suppress the vengeful spirit's power the entire time, preventing the evil power from affecting him for a very long period of time. However, once the vengeful spirit's power strengthened, it would not be so easy to suppress it anymore, unless he could maintain his absolute advantage over the vengeful spirit. As Jianshun hesitated, the scene of Huai and hunting him down appeared in his head once again. He suddenly clenched his teeth and made a firm decision. He began to absorb the presence from the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Afterwards, Jianshun began a long period of secluded cultivation. Through the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, his soul basically grew every day. However, as his soul strengthened, the number of soul recovery pills he needed to recover the power of his soul gradually increased as well. In just half a month, Jianshun had used up all the soul recovery pills on him. Without the help of the soul recovery pills, It would take him an extremely long time to recover the power of his soul once it was completely depleted. However, Jianshun had no intentions of stopping. He called Kea over and gave Kea a large number of supreme-grade divine crystals. He began to purchase soul recovery pills, as well as all the heavenly resources that could recover the power of the soul on the spatial battleship, before continuing his seclusion. In the blink of an eye, Jianshun had already been in seclusion for 2 months. During those 2 months, Jianshun had used up countless soul recovery pills. Basically, all the soul recovery pills and heavenly resources that could be purchased on the spatial battleship had been purchased by Jianshun, which directly caused the price of the soul recovery pills to skyrocket. After 2 months of seclusion, Jianshun's soul finally broke through to Overgod as well. He had formally reached the level of a divine king. Even though he was only an early divine king, he had reached the peak of early divine king. He was only a step away from mid-divine king. Of course, this was only the power of his soul that had increased. His chaotic force and comprehension of the laws of the sword remained at late Overgod. However, it also left behind some hidden dangers. The sliver of evil power in his Yuan spirit had strengthened as well. The desolate and ancient presence from the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline had become extremely weak now. However, Jianshun still did not end his seclusion. In his mind, he experienced a scene that had already been repeated countless times. It was the scene of the ancient Skywolf standing on the celestial bodies and howling at the sky. After observing it for 2 whole months, the scene had become like a branded into the depths of Jianshun's soul. It was difficult to erase. Many times, Jianshun would even have the misconception that he had become the ancient Skywolf, stepping on the celestial bodies and producing a howl that caused space to tremble. As he absorbed more and more of the desolate and ancient presence from the power of the bloodline, the misconception became more and more intense. It occurred more and more frequently. In the end, Jianshun actually felt like he could not help but imitate the ancient Skywolf and howl. Oh, well. Suddenly, Jianshun actually howled at the sky. It was actually the same as the wolf's howl. Jianshun had not done this intentionally. Instead, the image of the ancient Skywolf had impacted his soul time and time again over the past 2 months. It had affected him far too much, causing him to subconsciously think of himself as the ancient Skywolf. As a result, he naturally howled. However, when Jianshun howled, there was actually a terrifying pressure that stopped the flow of origin energy and caused space to freeze. Rings of visible sound waves expanded in all directions. Wherever they passed, all the decorations and tools in the cabin were reduced to ashes in a single moment. The entire cabin shook violently. If it were not for the protection of formations, the upper cabin that Jianshun resided in probably would have been pulverized by the sound waves. Jianshun opened his eyes. Confusion filled his eyes at first before his eyes suddenly narrowed. At this moment, he suddenly realized what he had done unintentionally, which shocked him greatly. He looked around and found that in this first-class cabin, apart from the jade bed that was protected by the formation and this room that was intact, all the furnishings in the room had been reduced to ashes. Moreover, what caused him to feel even more disbelief was that the dense origin energy in the high-class cabin had actually completely dissipated at this moment. Not a single trace of it remained. Could it be that this origin energy was shattered by the wolf's howl that I unintentionally let out just now? How is this possible? But if that's really the case, just how powerful was the wolf's howl earlier? Jianshun's heart churned. He could not remain calm at all. However, in the next moment, he felt a great sense of weakness. Jianshun immediately checked his body and discovered that the remaining power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline had basically been completely depleted. His own energy was constantly channeled into the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf, being converted into new bloodline power to replenish the depletion of the bloodline power. What's going on? Jianshun was completely confused. He was very confused by what had just happened. He seemed to be able to use the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline now. However, didn't the 3 elders at the very top of the spatial battleship say that the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline could not be absorbed? Even if he gave it to the wolf clan, it would be useless to them because it was a natural item. It could not be used after birth. However, how was he able to use the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline now? Chapter 2009. Jianshun was not the only one who was surprised. The sword spirits were surprised as well. How is this possible? Master has actually comprehended the ancient Skywolf's ability through such a thin strand of bloodline power? Master is a human. This is impossible, Jianing cried out in amazement. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline had completely calmed down. Not only was it unable to harm Jianshun, but it had even become a source of energy that Jianshun could use. As a result, there was no need for them to continue suppressing it. Xing, don't forget that Master's existence is not permitted by the world. He's been listed as a taboo. That's impossible in itself, yet Master still appeared. I think Master's existence is to make the impossible possible, Qing Suo explained. Xing nodded in agreement. I do feel that it does make some sense if what you've said is true. However, I think that since Master's existence is not permitted by the world, it definitely isn't as simple as it seems on the surface. There must be an even greater secret behind this, or it would be impossible for him to be listed as a taboo. It's just a pity that although we're born in the universe and can sometimes understand things that even grand exalts who have comprehended the way of divination are unable to divine, we can only understand the tip of the iceberg. As a result, we don't know what secrets Master is hiding, such that even the world forbids him from appearing. Master is still very weak right now. He's not even a 9 heavenly Xian immortal, so he obviously can't alarm this universe. However, once Master's strength increases and reaches a level where he can make this universe take him seriously or influence this universe, it's extremely likely that Master will be mercilessly wiped out by the ways of the world, Xing said sternly towards the end. Qing Suo's heart sank when he heard that. He said sternly, the merciless wiping out of the ways of the world is extremely rare. Ever since we were born, we've never heard of anyone surviving the wiping out of the ways of the world. The only way to resist the wiping out of the ways of the world is to reach Master's level of cultivation. Xing sighed. Reaching Master's level of cultivation is easier said than done. Master is one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortals world. He has reached the limits of immortal exalts. Even people with unprecedented talent may not be able to become a grand exalt. Moreover, Master cultivates the chaotic body. Over the countless years, there have been many people who have cultivated the chaotic body, including some supreme prodigies with extraordinary talent. However, no one has ever been able to cultivate the chaotic body to the level of immortal exalts. Xing paused there before continuing. However, Master's existence is not permitted by the world. I believe Master will definitely be able to create a miracle. I hope Master can become the first person to cultivate the chaotic body to the level of immortal exalts and reach the legendary great perfection of the chaotic body. Otherwise, Master will never be able to escape the merciless wiping out of the ways of the world. Xing and Qing Suo communicated secretly. Jianshun had no idea what they were talking about. At this moment, Jianshun carefully observed the situation within his body. Most of his attention was focused on the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. At this moment, the dim power of the bloodline was constantly absorbing Jianshun's energy to recover. Finally, half a day later, the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within Jianshun reached saturation. It stopped absorbing Jianshun's energy, and the tiny power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline was filled with great power once again. Jianshun grumbled inside as he sensed the sliver of connection he had with the power of the bloodline and the sense of weakness from his body. He really had no idea whether it was a blessing or a curse for him to obtain the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. This was because the amount of energy the power of the bloodline had absorbed in half a day would take him an entire year to recover. Moreover, this was due to the great recovery abilities of the chaotic body. If it were someone else, they probably would not have been able to recover even after several decades. or even centuries. Afterwards, Jianshan checked the strand of evil energy that belonged to the vengeful spirit in his soul. Before this, the strand of evil energy was still very weak. With his current strength, he could easily suppress it. Even if the power of his soul ran out, the evil energy would struggle to affect his mind. After all, his strength had increased at an extremely rapid rate after coming to the Saint's world. He was no longer the puny little god he was when he fought against the ancestor of the Liu family. The difference between him and the evil energy naturally grew larger and larger. But now, after absorbing the presence of the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, the evil energy's benefits completely exceeded his. Even though the power of his soul had reached the level of early Divine King, the difference between him and the evil energy rapidly shrank. Jianshan sighed gently. He really was helpless against the evil energy in his soul right now. The only thing he could do was increase his strength as quickly as possible. After calming himself down, Jianshan made his way out of the room. As soon as he arrived at the corridor outside, he discovered Kea walking towards him in a faint blue dress. Kea was clearly surprised when she saw Jianshan. She then smiled faintly. Jianshan, you've emerged from seclusion? I can feel that your soul has become even more powerful than before. Looks like you've benefited quite a lot from your seclusion this time. Kea, you can sense that my soul has become stronger? Jianshan asked in surprise. He had already concealed his presence, so he seemed like he had returned to his original state. He did not use the senses of his soul at all. Yet Kea could actually sense that his soul had become stronger, which surprised Jianshan very much. Let alone Kea, who was an overgod, even many divine kings would not necessarily be able to see through his current state. Yeah, it's not just you. I've discovered that I can clearly sense the strength of many divine kings who have concealed their presences. I can even tell whether they're weak or not, said Kea. Jianshan stared at Kea deeply. The various inexplicable things that had happened to Kea had made Jianshan sink into his thoughts more than once. He really did not understand why Kea had changed so drastically after awakening. She was still the same person as before. The only difference was that her abilities had undergone an earth-shattering change compared to before. Jianshan did not believe that all of this was because Kea had ingested a large number of heavenly resources while she was unconscious, as the heavenly resources he had given Kea were nowhere near as effective as this. Kea arrived before Jianshan and said, Jianshan, there's going to be a large-scale exchange on the spatial battleship. Although it's called an exchange, it's actually an exchange of treasures between cultivators. It's said that the comprehension of the laws of the sword from primordial realm experts will appear during the exchange. I think it should be of some help to you. What? The comprehension of the laws of the sword from primordial realm experts? Jianshan's eyes immediately lit up. He had already found the cultivation resources he needed to reach the 12th layer of chaotic force. The only thing he lacked was comprehension of laws.